Schaller skills. So good morning, everyone. I am Leslie Schaller. I am the Director of Programs at the Appalachian Center for Economic Networks, commonly referred to as ACENET. We're headquartered in Appalachia, Ohio, but do a lot of work throughout the region. So again, it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. We've had a little hiatus over the last couple of months with the summit. So I hope everyone had happy holidays in November and December. We missed you, but we're back. We have Summit 5 here, the end of January, and Summit 6, the end of February. 6 will be sort of our capstone, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at 12:45 today during the wrap up. So just a couple things to remember about our Zoom meetings. Please forward any questions you might have throughout the chat. We will take breaks or pauses so that folks can ask presenters questions. But Kayla from ARC&D will be monitoring the chat and give us all a heads up if a pressing question or comment comes to light during any of our panels. We would also encourage you to go to the cannetwork.org website. All the previous summits have been recorded. A lot of the resources that our panelists have brought to the table as we've prepared information to present is also available through the website as well. And stay tuned if you are a follower of the Central Appalachian Network. We now have a whole marketing team that is working on, as I say, bringing CAN into the 21st century of media and messaging. So you'll see a lot of updates coming soon to the CAN website that will be much more current, especially through this sort of transformative phase or evolution that CAN is going through. And then always, follow us on social media. There's going to be a lot more postings, particularly to Facebook, and CAN is going to be using LinkedIn a little bit more here in the future. So I'm going to share my screen just to let everyone know, I guess, where we're at today in terms of welcoming you back to our process. I think one of the things that I just want to underscore is that this is a joint effort through the Central Appalachian Network and the USDA. But there have been a lot of other partners and stakeholders really making this happen for us in these 6 summits. So what we're going to do today is probably flip back and forth between panelists and slideshows. If there's any slideshow information that you feel you're missing or would like more information on, again, shameless infomercial, go to the CAN website and you'll be able to get it more information. So I also want to do a shout out to our sponsors, because obviously it takes a lot of planning and effort and a lot of participants to put this content together. So thanks to the Educational Foundation of America, the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, and the Sugar Bush Valley Impact Investments. And if you've been, and I know many folks have been to the previous summits, I just want to underscore what our goals have been. A lot of our focus has been around healthy food access and affordability. So we've had many presenters through the first 4 summits really focus on what organizations are doing to really come up with new models and hopefully sustainable solutions to really address some of the problems we have related to food security within the region. I think the other important thing to underscore is that this is really the work of a coalition of organizations. So if you're not maybe as situated in the network within all the work that's happening in Central Appalachia, there's a lot of different entry ramps. The food and ag system working groups are probably a great starting point for folks. And then we're really employing targeted assistance from USDA and other qualified providers. So this is, I would say, on the horizon, work that we're going to see more investment in. There's a lot of exciting programming and cooperative agreements coming out of USDA here in the recent years. So we want to take advantage of that for our areas, for our communities, for folks who might be underserved. And then we want to continue to attract federal, public, and private funding. As we learn from one another as peers, I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the best practices or learning that's happened maybe in one subregion can be replicated. So scaling programs, I think, is really one of the outcomes that we're hoping to continue to innovate. And then we invite other nonprofit partners. So if you're working throughout Central Appalachia, maybe not directly in food security or healthy food access, but if there's other related projects, we would encourage you to join the network. So that's kind of the overall framing for the summit. We have a busy agenda today. Martin Richards and Martin is the co-chair of the Healthy Food Access Working Group for CAN. We're really going to focus on sort of reorganizing, re-engaging ourselves today to talk about processing, aggregation, and distribution. Infrastructure is pretty essential. We believe if we're going to create more food security throughout the region. And we're going to kick off our summit today with the oldest food hub in Central Appalachia, Appalachian Harvest, which is operated by Appalachian Sustainable Development. So Kathleen Terry Baker and her team will be really giving an in-depth overview of what they've learned operating a food hub and the many new directions that ASD and Appalachian Harvest are embarking on as they grow that operations. Meat, obviously, has been one of the challenges in terms of finding production and processing throughout the region. So we're going to have 4 presenters from Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia talk about some of the meat facilities that have been developed in recent years and stuff that's on the cusp of being implemented throughout the region. And then Jennifer, our moderator for our active breaks always, will take over. That's your opportune time to give some feedback, but also maybe step away for a bio break. And then we'll come back and end the day with investments in infrastructure. We have actually all our friends from West Virginia who are going to be talking about some of the different ways that investment is happening in the processing, aggregation, and distribution segment of our local regional food economies. And then I'll end the day. You'll be back with me, and I'll just do a little bit of wrap up and some teaser highlights for Summit 6 in February. So shameless infomercial, once again, we really encourage people, no matter what their roles might be, to take a look at the Central Appalachian Network Processing, Aggregation, and Distribution Working Group. We have this nifty chart that sort of organizes what this working group is focused on in the coming years. We have a great facilitator from Rural Support Partners who's been with us for a while, Atlas Charles. They have really helped us develop and organize our goals and objectives within the PAD working group. So if infrastructure is something that you're already engaged in, or you're looking for infrastructure development within the food sector in your subregion, again, please join us. There'll be many more resources that are being organized, and as I said, will debut on both our social media platforms and the website. So infrastructure takes many forms in Appalachia. I think sometimes we underestimate the amazing work that's been really led by grassroots organizations throughout Central Appalachia. So we count things like community gardens. Oftentimes that's a starting point for community residents to take more control of healthy food access. We've seen produce auctions spring up. We see more and more farm incubation programs begin throughout Central Appalachia. Obviously, we have a long tradition of farmers markets, but we have more mobile markets and more innovation in terms of pop-up markets to really meet the demand. I think we saw a lot of innovation in this space over the last 3 years with COVID, where many folks and communities had to pivot and figure out how to increase food access during the pandemic. We've also seen the rise of different farmers markets developing brick and mortar operations. So what I often refer to as the social enterprise retail stores. Throughout the summit, we've heard some of the managers and leaders within those operations, like the Wild Ramp, share their model. There's quite a few, again, all through Central Appalachia. And I think at some point we might want to focus just on a workshop or a peer learning opportunity, just as these models have sprung up over the last 12, 15 years, and many of them have now evolved to do other things as well. We also have a history of commercial community kitchens. Again, Summit 3, where we really focused on some of the challenges folks in Eastern Kentucky were having to navigate with the flood, gave us that sense that these community kitchens really played an important role to make sure in a disaster situation that folks had simple access to food. So having that infrastructure in place, it might be a nonprofit organization, it might be a food bank that has added a community kitchen to their operations. But there's a lot of different models out there that, again, really helps build resilience within our communities. And then kitchen incubators, I will say out loud and proud that AceNet has operated the Food Venture Center. We were the first kitchen incubator to open up in the 90s in Central Appalachia. And now we've been delighted to see so many more launch and flourish in the last 20 years, 25 years. So it's pretty exciting to see these commercial spaces really launch entrepreneurs, especially folks who would not typically have access to these types of resources. So low income, marginalized entrepreneurs being able to come into shared space and then get all the wraparound services they need to launch food businesses. I refer to a lot of this work now, especially as many of these incubation programs have grown and morphed over the years, is that they've really become food enterprise centers and business incubators that now are accelerators. Many folks have launched businesses in their shared space. Those folks have gone on to start their own processing facilities, but stay embedded in a peer network. So using a lot of the knowledge within the local and regional food sector has, I think, enabled us throughout the region to really accelerate economic opportunity and new business growth. And then meat and dairy processors. Again, thank you, USDA. There's a lot more focus right now on especially our legacy meat processors. How do we help folks get to the next level? How do we create more infrastructure so that we do have a more robust meat processing and dairy processing segment throughout Central Appalachia? A lot of feasibility analysis has been developed over the last couple of years, and now we're seeing more financial investment at many different levels, many types of investors looking at meat and dairy for production. And then mills for grains and legumes. One of our startup businesses a number of years ago that got started at the Food Venture Center, Shagbark Seed and Mill, actually a number of years ago during their growth, jumped just down the street, a couple doors down, and have their own mill facility. So we're seeing, I think, more interest in mills coming back in communities. And Shagbark, again, is very interested working at the regional level to help other budding entrepreneurs or grain farmers look at milling as a possible operation. So, boy, what have we learned the last 3 years? I mean, COVID, has knocked us a bit, but I think we've learned a lot and we've had to pivot quite a bit. So I would argue that the fact that we had a lot of this infrastructure in place allowed us to have a stronger foundation for resilience. So we've seen increased access to local food. We've seen increased sales at farmers markets, at mobile markets, at pop-ups. We're seeing the demand for local meat really be an engine for increased investment in meat processing. There's more folks trying to figure out new solutions for sales and distribution to really meet both the wholesale and just some of the direct sales. A lot of our meat and livestock operators will sell out before a farmer's market even ends. So awareness among consumers, I think that stronger commitment to buying local has been one of the silver linings coming out of COVID. I hope that sticks. I think people, now that they've had the experience of buying local, really enjoying quality products, feeling that connection to their neighbors who are producers, I hope will permanently change a lot of these customer behaviors. We've seen increased purchasing from food banks and schools. Our healthcare partners have really stepped up. We've come up with a lot of new collaborative ways to get food to especially folks who might be struggling with food insecurity. And then because there are so many kitchen incubators and retail operators and food enterprise accelerators, we've just seen a tremendous amount of growth with new businesses being launched, creating all sorts of new specialty products, people looking at the opportunity that organics can provide. And I think just trying to figure out, not that this has been an easy nut to crack, but how do we distribute more throughout the region? At times, it's a little ironic. We see this in Ohio, that a lot of our food producers have better access to East Coast and Midwest markets than they do to Central Appalachia. So partnerships throughout Appalachia are really working on that challenge, and I think we're finding new solutions. We've also seen a lot of new capital solutions emerged, and we'll be hearing from more of our presenters this afternoon. So you know me, I always have to animate and acknowledge with some photos, so you think of Mountain Harvest Kitchen in Unicoi, Tennessee, and the entrepreneurs that they're serving, or the amazing Chester Produce Auction here in Morgan County, Ohio. I have to shamelessly crow a little bit about AceNet's Food and Farm Enterprise Center in the city of Nelsonville. One of our anchor tenants, Milo's Whole World Gourmet, has been able to secure $1 million to create a new thermal processing facility within our larger 100,000 square foot facility. So that's really driving not just opportunity, job creation, more national wholesale distribution for Jonathan's business. It's also enabling him to create more co-packing. We've already had one other business relocate from Virginia to be able to take advantage of some of the processing infrastructure that AceNet has helped develop. And then, it's vehicles too. I mean, I think we all see vehicles on the road now, whether it's privately owned processors like Snowville Creamery, or it's our social enterprise programs, the Veggie Van of Community Food Initiatives, or the Chesterfield Produce Auction, doing distribution throughout Ohio and into West Virginia of a lot of the produce that's coming out of the produce auction. And then we've seen evolution here. So this is the online food hub, recently securing USDA FMPP funding. This is a space that's catty corner right across the street from their retail operation, the Wild Ramp. They have a smaller space for aggregation of product, and then they have this lovely new delivery van for distribution as well at the local level. Healthcare really have stepped up. It seems like the last couple of years in Ohio, we've been able to create lots of opportunities, not just through these partnerships to serve customers, but also to really create more opportunity and sales for our producers and our processors here in Ohio. Increased meat, boy, pretty much every independently owned grocery store in southeastern Ohio is carrying local meat products. Adam Cody later on in the meat panel will be talking about AceNet's dedicated meat processing facility. But even at farmers markets, as I mentioned earlier, we're just seeing incredible sales. So I'm going to pass the baton now to Martin, but I think, as much as we talk about the infrastructure piece, COVID and climate pivots only worked because they were grounded in networks. It's those relationships of trust at the local, sub-regional, and regional level that really makes this stuff hum. So as much as we really would encourage policymakers and investors to put more money in our pockets to create this infrastructure, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit businesses, we also recognize it's the people power that really acts as the fuel. Infrastructure is just one piece, and the human infrastructure we can never not recognize as really being what makes this whole system hum. So, Martin, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, get all this set up. All right, you all, is it showing up?
Yes.
It is.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of us, when you think of infrastructure, it's the bricks and mortar type of stuff. But as Leslie said, it is really the warm bodies that get up every morning to make this stuff happen that is critical. And I would move some of this stuff around. We often forget about that, but we have seen, at least for Community Farm Alliance, especially for COVID and then recent flooding this year, how important that human infrastructure is. I'm going to try to move through this stuff pretty quickly. But it, what CFA can track, just that we're connected with, there's been about $30 million invested in local food systems over the last 10 years in East Kentucky. And I'm sure it's probably another double that that other folks have invested in it. And it has been pretty critical to all this. And these are just some of the funders that I want to acknowledge through CFA. And there's probably others that I have missed. And if you're on here, please poke me and let me know about that. But over the last 3 years, Kentuckians' food security has been severely impacted by COVID and extreme events. The primary investment mechanism that CFA has utilized is these three programs that we have. Farmers Market Support Program, Kentucky Double Dollars, and the Fresh RX program. And over these last 3 years, approximately 54% of Kentucky Double Dollar customers said that COVID made it more difficult to access fresh and healthy food. Yet 82% said that they had begun visiting farmers markets more often. And over half of the farmers market vendors either maintained or increased their sales during this time. And a majority of them saw sales increase related to the Double Dollars program. So, from that, this program, like other programs, provided both consumers and producers an important safety net during this time of uncertainty. And the physical infrastructure developed around Kentucky Double Dollars also played an enormous role in mitigating these recent crises. For instance, during COVID, CFA and Department of Agriculture and other organizations were able to quickly provide farmers markets with additional resources and PA to help those markets to not only remain open, but safe places for people's jobs. And, this is just one kind of testimonial from one person during that time. And I think the hand washing station was CFA helped that market get that. So, following the historic floods of 2022, this infrastructure proved to be an important mechanism, this human infrastructure, an important mechanism for getting food to those most impacted while also supporting local farmers. And one of those mechanisms was Central Appalachian Family Farm Fund, which, by the way, just reopened for another round here this week, I believe. And you can get up with Jennifer Weaver. She is the head honcho over that one. That human infrastructure, especially the nonprofit sector that has been growing around this, all came together and around this flood. It was a huge collaborative effort, to really address this issue. And one of the great things about nonprofit sector is we're pretty nimble and able to shift gears, unlike a lot of state and local governments. And we were happy to work with them for that. So immediately following the flood, support organizations coordinated efforts, funding streams to launch free markets in 4 of the counties most impacted by those floods. And those free markets were the result of intentional and strategic coordination of ag support organizations, institutes, higher education, local farmers, and private funders. And this is some of our great team. It was there. I think Margie is actually on this call. Margie is on the far left there. With she and B are part of our farmers market support program. So these donations, the Well-Connected Network was able to secure those significant donations of fresh produce from farmers across the state whose operations had not been impacted by the flood. These donations were then distributed to participating markets along with significant funding from private sources. Utilizing these resources, we were able to tailor the structure of the free market. Lost my place here. We were able to tailor the structure of the free markets based on what worked best in their communities. And the process was able to impact food security brought on the flood, with many markets directing some, if not all, of the private funding directly in the pockets of farmers whose operations had experienced significant disturbance. The only reason these free markets worked is because of the existing infrastructure and networks that had been well established before the flood. So this provides an exceptional look into the potential for food systems to exhibit resiliency in the face of adversity. And we have a number of staff on here, and I hope I represented your work well. And if I forgot something, please jump in. And I am going to stop sharing. I know we're a little bit over.
No, we got 3 minutes. We got 3 minutes.
I thought we had till 9:30.
Well, I'm wondering if folks have questions. This was sort of the setup for the rest of the day. So hopefully Martin and I have grounded you in what we're going to talk about and what our panelists are going to present. But I'm wondering if, Kayla, I haven't been monitoring the chat. Are there any questions that immediately come to mind for me or for Martin? Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, everyone's.
Yes.
Guess not. We did an excellent job.
I think I hear someone.
Yeah. My name is Edmond Kusoa. I'm from Sierra Leone, West Africa. I actually want to understand, what do you people mean by free farmer market? Is it that the food commodities that you sell in that particular market are free? People will just come and buy? Or what do you mean actually by free farmer market?
Yeah, Edmund, it was just a response to that flood. So, and it just was for, was it 1 month, Jennifer, maybe, or 2 months?
It was for 1 month in 4 markets in the most heavily impacted counties from the flood.
Yeah. So it, through private donations, you know, we were able to buy product from farmers, first up with farmers, you know, in the region who had lost markets. And then we were able to buy from other farmers just outside the region who had product. And for the customers, it was free. They were given tokens that they could spend for it. But again, these customers, right? Some of them had like lost everything, their homes, you know, unfortunately, even family. So, you know, they didn't have the resources, you know, the actual money. So they were able to come and get food at these free markets for that one time. That makes sense, Edmund?
Yes. Okay, because that is quite too different from the scenario in Africa. That's why I asked that question.
Glad you're here.
Okay, well, we're right on time. I'm gonna segue us now to Kathleen Terry Baker and her team, and they are going to give us an overview. I always feel like I sort of am in touch with where Appalachian Harvest and ASD are headed, but I know that I'm going to learn some stuff here again today as well. So Kathleen, Brittany, and Katie are going to take it from here. I'll let them do deeper introductions of the organization and their roles.
Thanks, Leslie. Pleasure to be here, and really happy to be able to share some information about ASD. We're looking at this as sort of like a past, present, and future. So naturally, since I'm the old one, I'm going to be the historian. My name is Kathleen Terry Baker. I'm the CEO at Appalachian Sustainable Development. I apologize, I'm coming to you from my car. That 17th snowflake this morning must have nuked my DSL internet. So if I cut out, then I'm sure Brittany and Katie will pick up for me. So if you don't mind moving on, Brittany, to that first slide. So ASD is a nonprofit, and we are a 501c3 that is based in Southwest Virginia, kind of the Kentucky and West Virginia part and Tennessee part of Virginia. So we have a lot of connections to our friends in the Central Appalachian Network, have been doing work in the food and ag sector since 1995. If you can just move on to that first slide about Appalachian Harvest. So what we wanted to talk about today was our oldest program, and our oldest program is Appalachian Harvest, which is a food hub that was established in 2000. It was created to address the issue that transitioning tobacco farmers had when they were losing their subsidies. So we were looking for an alternative product for them. And this is, Appalachian Harvest is probably one of the oldest food hubs in the country. And it was born out of this need to find an alternative crop for tobacco producers. And probably not intuitively, what our founders picked was organic produce. And we were also in the middle of nowhere in terms of markets of any scale. And so over the years, what we have evolved into doing is doing what a lot of food hubs do, which is aggregate product from multiple farmers of different scales and getting it to markets. And in our case, it's in the Mid-Atlantic. And a lot of that is because historically, those were where the markets were that actually valued locally or regionally produced food. There just wasn't the markets of any scale that were much closer to where we are. Over time, we have evolved from doing just certified organic produce to doing conventional as well. Last few years, we've done about between 3 and 3.5 million in sales annually. And this past year, we capped 30 million since our inception. Our buyers are typically large wholesale buyers, grocery store chains, produce brokers that are in the Mid-Atlantic. So we go as far south as Landover, Maryland, as far north as Landover, Maryland, and as far south as Atlanta, Georgia, and kind of several points in between. And what we do is go to distribution centers because it's a much more cost-effective way than going store to store. Over the last few years, though, we've been really trying to develop some markets that are more internal to Central Appalachia so that we can have a mixture of markets and so that not all of our food is going into the Mid-Atlantic markets. And so the smaller buyers are like school systems or smaller supermarket chains, and just other buyers that are in the region that we can service cost effectively. Mostly what we sell is whole produce. That's historically been our primary product line. We did start selling value-added products a few years ago, and then in 2022, towards the end of the last quarter of 22, we started selling local beef, and we're super excited about that program. I know Brittany's going to share more about that. So our infrastructure is just a 15,000 square foot warehouse. About a third of it's cooled, and we have a couple of tractor trailers with 3 53-foot trailers and a box truck. And we can move on. So what I wanted to do is, just because I'm supposed to be doing the history part of this, just run through a little brief timeline. So I mentioned we started in 2000, and we were established in the thriving metropolis of Stickleyville, Virginia, which when I first started working here, I had to drive through it about 4 times till I found it. And unfortunately, the facility burned down in 07. So we spent 07 in a temporary facility. And then in 08, we ended up building our facility that we're using now in Duffield. In 09, we started looking around at producers and felt that we really needed to not just work with certified organic produce growers, and started working with non-certified. We also began working with farmers on food safety education. So we've been looking at GAP or other food safety certification systems since before 09. In 2011 is when our buyers actually required that all of our farmers be certified. That's also the year that we broke $1 million in annual sales. So in 2016, just kind of jumping forward to that, we did get $1.5 million power grant to work with our partners, many of whom were in the Central Appalachian Network, to start the Central Appalachian Food Corridor. And this was, it kind of had its early stage with VC2, which many of you are, I'm sure, are familiar with them. And then we got together, and we're going to talk more about that later, but this was just a group of collaborators, many of whom are on the call today, getting together to try and find economies of collaboration. This was also the year that we exceeded 2 million annually in sales. 2018, we got a second power grant for the corridor and exceeded 3 million in sales. And then 2020, we were one of the first USDA regional food system partnerships recipients from the first year of that program. And all of that money has not gone just to ASD. It's gone through ASD to a host of different partners, because that's the whole point of that corridor project. And I look forward to sharing just a little bit more of its background. And I know Brittany will be sharing some more of that as well. And then in 22, I mentioned we topped 30 million in sales, and then began selling beef. So I want to share like a little bit of the history of the Central Appalachian Food Corridor, and then I know Brittany will give a few more details. But basically, gosh, about 2010, it suddenly started dawning on me that we had a lot of people coming through our food hub learning about what we do, and then they would set up shop and compete with us. And I don't believe it was intentional. It was just how it was happening. And I no matter how much we preached collaboration, just I don't think people understood what we meant. And so I think in about 2012-ish, I tried to get a group of folks together, and they really didn't understand what I meant about collaborating and working together. And then finally, with the help of the Central Appalachian Network and our deep partnerships and trusting relationships that we had, we were able to put that together in about the 2016 timeframe. And the whole point of the corridor was to find ways that we can work together to make this system more efficient. You heard Martin talk about the infrastructure that was in place that meant that we could actually support the flood victims in Kentucky. We found the same thing during COVID. It's like this infrastructure that we're working to build and the relationships that we have are what make it viable and resilient. What we got to do is figure out the financial pieces of this and how we build the markets within Central Appalachia that we can actually serve. And I won't go into a lot more detail because I want to leave that for Brittany. I can tell you a couple of the, here's a slide with a few of, this is not all of the partners, this is some of them. We obviously have worked super closely with our CAN partners and are pretty excited about some of the newer partners that we're working with. I can just highlight Preston County Workshop, who was a subrecipient in our first power grant for additional funding to buy a cooler. And ever since then, we've been working so closely with them. And it's just been this amazing relationship that has resulted in us getting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of staple goods and produce to their communities in Preston County. And then like us also working together on a couple of different projects that just, it has planted seeds. And I think that's one of the beauties of this project is it's more than just the seeds. It's actually producing some fruit. So just to highlight a couple of the successes we've had. One of the things that I love about the corridor project is that it's helping us to, and also the CAN PAD group that is the subgroup of some of the work that we're doing through CAN, is that we can look at infrastructure much more creatively. Like how do we use things so that we're not having to build a building and staff it and have trucks. Like we don't need all of that everywhere. We need it some places. And so helping us to think through that as a team is really helpful. We're also able to provide a lot of different support. Leslie mentioned earlier that like we all have different skills. That's one of the beautiful things about this project and about CAN is that ASD doesn't have to be an expert in like what AceNet is, because AceNet's, they've got it going on when it comes to value-added production and support. We do have a lot of history of doing certification systems like and supporting our farmers and producers with training and technical assistance for things like forest grown verified, point of harvest, organic, food safety. We created a lot of toolkits and videos and other things like product catalogs to help promote producers. And we also have been able to bring more partners into this project and expanded the number of products that we're working with. And then a few of the challenges is just all of us being at different scale, trying to figure out how we break even. One of my big focus areas is always, how do we make this food system not a house of cards? How are we making it so that we are all viable and financially sustainable so that our producers and our buyers can count on us? We also know that we've got to figure out how to serve these higher, more expensive markets to serve. And then our topography and geography, and just trying to figure out all these pieces all at once. And so that's it for me. I'm gonna turn it over. I know I have food access. I wanted to just touch on very, very briefly. If you want to switch slides. And the next one. I just wanted to mention, we do a lot of buying of seconds and donating that product to those in need. And that just also to touch on what Martin said about infrastructure, we were able to donate 5 million pounds of food in like 14 months during COVID, only because of the infrastructure and our partnerships that we had put together. And so there's just so many things that I think about our work that connect both the economic development side and our food security work. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brittany Woodby. I'm with Appalachian Harvest, which is the food hub program for Appalachian sustainable development. Let me just move a few things around. All right. So I want to talk to you guys today about the challenges and the solutions regarding food hubs, specifically to where we have been, where we've seen the opportunity to grow and to change. And I think that it's important to understand that if you are in the growing spaces of being a food hub, you're not alone. There is a network of food hubs that have the experience or can help you troubleshoot those specific things that you guys might be experiencing. So with 23 years of experience, the Appalachian Harvest Food Hub team has overcome various challenges since its inception and created solutions that helped broaden our partnerships, our footprint, and our financial returns for our producers. Because again, our number one focus is making sure that our farmers are staying on their farms, that this is a profitable means of income for them, and as well as providing food insecurity for the community. So today we're going to look at 3 scenarios that had a very large impact on our mission, our economic growth, also the growth of the economy with where we are in Duffield and Southwest Virginia, and the future business strategies that we have identified as opportunities. And I just wanted to throw this out there. I feel a lot of us kind of get in the weeds of the day-to-day things, and we kind of have to kind of reassess and remember that passion's our number one goal when we're talking about food hubs and the food network. So life is full of challenges, but I always have the 3 Ps: passion, patience, and persistence. And the 4th one is pizza. And that was by Butch Hartman. So challenge number 1, this does speak back to what Kathleen was talking about with the corridor project. So in that, there was a focus on Kentucky as well, and there was highly great produce out of Kentucky. Those growers and the growing conditions and the soil conditions produce some of the best quality in the country. But we had limited access to those growers, and those growers had limited access to us and to other markets due to the fact that their logistics in Kentucky, as we all know, living and growing up in Appalachia, is very difficult, not just by a car, but whenever you're starting to talk about box trucks and semis. So they were working with limited capacity around the logistics. And we were only able to pick up specific crops such as winter squash 2 to 3 times per year. That's not a lot of market access for those growers. It means that they're not getting as high dollar premiums for some of the other items that they were growing to be able to be more profitable. And we had to pivot. You know, it's not a bad thing that we were just getting winter squash from them, but at least it was a starting point. It was a produce that we knew that could hold. So that was just the first step, but we knew we had to expand to be able to better support Kentucky growers. So the resolution there really was to partner with an existing entity in Kentucky that was, one, close to the cluster of growers that we were working with, that had a docking capacity, and 3, had storage space for those growers so that we could aggregate the product so that our trucks could do one stop. And just to kind of put that into perspective for everyone, that meant that if we were going from our warehouse in Duffield, Virginia, to, let's say, 6 growers in Kentucky, that could easily have been a 2-day job. That's how spread out, that's how the routes were just very hard to navigate and to get around quickly and efficiently. And being able to find an existing partner who was able to help us bring the growers together to drop off at their facility meant that we could cut that time to a day run. So we cut the time in half. And the answer for that was God's Pantry Food Bank in Lexington, Kentucky. So not only were we able to increase the truck pickup days to 2 times per week instead of per year, we also were able to expand the variety of produce that was being offered into larger markets for Kentucky grown produce. So not only were the farmers benefiting, but the brand for Kentucky grown was benefiting, and being able to be sold back into larger markets and helped our offering because a lot of the produce that we were picking up from Kentucky, a lot of the brassicas and things like that were just a great offering for us to push back into our customers as well. And the graph on the side just kind of shows the major truck routes running through Kentucky. So as you can see, it's a little bit harder from Southwest Virginia to even hit a main artery when we're talking about trucking routes specifically. Challenge number 2 is kind of twofold. So we're going to talk about the first one, and that's the rising fuel costs. Now, that's not something that's just specific to this year or last year. It's been a challenge since the inception of the Food Hub. So the resolutions that we've taken, while they're in place now, it's a continuous evolution of us looking towards the future and seeing how we can do things better. So it's ever evolving. So we looked at 3 specific areas that could help offset the fuel cost increases while only passing along a minimal price increase to our customers year over year, because the produce market is very competitive whenever it comes to pricing and offering, and we have to make sure that we are still in the space where we can be competitive within the market. So how we did that was, number 1, we increased our backhauling opportunities for trucks during the harvest season. While regional loads that pay well are still very hard to find, we are able to find more in the Georgia-Florida region. This seems to be the biggest payout that we found so far. So it's around $3 a mile. To put that into perspective, our truckloads typically do about 51 cents per mile. That's our cost to have the trucks on the road and do deliveries. So there's a little bit of profit there that we can pocket during the off season or during the regular season. And then during the off season, we utilize backhauling to keep our drivers employed, which is important to keep that stability for those drivers. And then also keep our trucks on the road so that we're still visible. We're still able to make the deliveries 52 weeks out of the year if we're talking about cabbage specifically. So it's an ecosystem, and it kind of very much works well within that space. Strategy number 2 was being more deliberate that every truck leaving our dock was full. Didn't always happen, but if that is your goal and that is your focus, you're going to start seeing those trucks, the capacity be a lot fuller than what it would if it was not a specific goal. Obviously, if the truck is full, your cost goes down. You're able to, really kind of hone in on that profit a lot better than if it was just 1 or 2 pallets on even a box truck. And then 3, we continually look at the route feasibility analysis and filling in the gaps that are identified. So if we know that we have to be on certain routes, but there's an opportunity for bringing on a new customer or increasing the product availability on the offer sheets, such as beef or value added, we're able to increase the feasibility of those routes being sustainable in the future or outside of grants that we might currently be working with. So the challenge in this space, the next one was the lack of available CDL drivers in our region. So we ran into, it was kind of post-pandemic, like as we were coming out, we noticed that our pool of CDL drivers dropped drastically during that particular time. And it wasn't just us seeing it, it kind of seemed to be an industry-wide challenge. And not only it being a challenge for the industry, we were also seeing many numbers being declined in the CDL schools as well. So there was just a lack of interest and want to be in there, in that space. So we have a program called Groundwork that is the workforce development program at Typically those participants are going through programs that are learning about farming and market gardening and floral production and things like that. And we realized quickly that that was a pathway that we could create for Groundwork, was a CDL pathway for the participants. To date, we have 2 participants that have went through the program for CDLs and have passed their CDL and are actually still working for us and will continue to work for us. That is our goal. We would love everyone who goes through the program to remain in our company and better themselves personally and professionally. So the first one through the program was Dylan. You can see him on the side there. Dylan did complete his 3rd Groundwork term and is now a full-time employee with Appalachian Harvest. So not only did we create a pathway for them to learn a new skill and become certified in that skill, but we're also expanding the workforce for full-time employees. The second driver is Amanda, and she is absolutely amazing. She does our school routes in Southwest Virginia. And I will say that the energy that these 2 bring to the program is very catching and just kind of infiltrates the culture at the warehouse as well. So I think that that's important. If you're looking for solutions to problems, they really might be standing there staring you in the face. So sometimes it just takes a step back and looking at what capacity or what new type of thing you can do to add to your current programs to facilitate the problem. Challenge number 3 was leaving our meat producers behind. So Scott County in Virginia, their number 1 industry is agriculture. Within agriculture, meat producers brings in the most amount of profit and money into the region. And we realized last year, I'm sure Kathleen can say she's been talking about this for a while, but last year we were able to make some movement. So our challenge here was the vast amount of farmland in the region that was used for cattle farming. These farmers were being left out of not only the functions that the Food Hub had to offer, but also the access to markets and to transportation issues that they were dealing with. And out of that, we realized very quickly that we can turn that into a sustainable economic driving force as well. We can reduce the carbon footprint of those trucks transporting cattle out to the Midwest for the larger feedlots. And we could reduce the amount of stressors that the cows were under as well, which happy cows, happy meat, right? So we decided that we were going to partner with a newly launched USDA inspected beef processing facility that is located in the next county over in Lee County. And we were able to launch the Appalachian Harvest beef line last year. It was a pilot launch, so we're still working through things. Lots more to come from this, and we'll speak about that in a little bit. And we were able to sell and deliver beef through that pilot program that will roll into a year-round product line for our buyers. And the great thing about that is it's keeping local meat local. It is also creating more feasibility for our trucks to stay on the road during the off season, because meat we can sell 365 days a year. There's no seasonality whenever it comes to that. We can really work with the processing facility to create the slots that are needed for the demand that we're continuing to increase throughout the year. So some opportunities for growth and expansion, and I think this is the fun part, it's the looking forward. So from our learning experiences, we are able to confidently look forward to expansion and growth opportunities in our area and within the region. And I think what's important here is, while we're not going to tout that we are the experts, but we are trying to make steps forward so that we can be the education space for our farmers, for other food hubs, for other partners, and we continuously learn through those experiences. So we're going to just highlight 3 of those areas that we'll be focusing on for 2023 that have great potential for growth and expansion for Appalachian Harvest and our partners and our growers and our buyers, because it is a very symbiotic relationship. So most people miss opportunity because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. And that is the bulk of our clients and our customers within Southwest Virginia, as well as within the region itself. So opportunity number 1 is strengthen and expand our partnerships. So looking back at the corridor project, specifically with Kentucky, we were able to partner with K-Card and God's Pantry Food Bank under that particular grant. So with the success that we had over the past few years with making connections and strengthening connections and growing those seeds that we planted, the Food Hub hopes to increase the amount of growers and produce variety coming out of this region. And what that means is that when we find spaces to aggregate produce, we're able to reach a lot more growers within the area, because we're not limited to trucking times and driver times on the road and those types of logs, because we have reduced the amount of time that our truck driver is on the road using one pickup point. So we're able to start expanding who we're able to service within that area. The box truck that ARC helped us procure will be a very key component as we work to scale up the growers to meet buyer demand. It became apparent that a semi-load was still too large and it was too expensive, and there was too much of a carbon footprint to justify bringing that still on the road, but a box truck is perfect for those types of pickups. And it still allows us for a little bit of growth before we move into needing something larger like a semi. Another partnership that we have, and partnerships, there's many within the Regional Food System Program that is in West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, and Southwest Virginia, allowed us to sell, purchase, aggregate, and deliver food through that region. So we're able to pick up Snowville Creamery products in Ohio. We're able to deliver them to a food bank in West Virginia, as well as expand into the school space, which has not happened with any of the people within the partnership. But collaboratively, we were able to do so this year. And I think it's important to know that while we are learning, we are adjusting and we are continuing to grow what we're doing and the partners we're able to help. So as 2003 comes in and we shift into the more larger sales presence, because we have worked so hard over the past year, making sure logistics was sound and making sure that people were being educated, that we can now really focus on the selling part on a mass level to really be able to increase profitability within those partnerships. And the school programs from that, selling into their cafeterias, Coalfield Development now is actually going into the cafeterias and doing taste testings of local produce. And they are getting kids more engaged in the process of ag education. And we're just going to continue to see that grow with the partnership that Coalfield has with the West Virginia Department of Education. Everyone is always on board with local, but sometimes it takes a minute to get everything, all the pieces lined up and things tied together for us to be able to really make an impact. Our partners and our team are identifying gaps in the local produce and value-added products to incorporate additional partners to strengthen our offerings to our customers. And I do think that we see this a lot with AceNet's customers and clients that they work with. We didn't have a space for a really knockout salsa, and we were able to bring on Frog Ranch, and we were able to expand Shagbark Mills produce or their product line and the market availability and knowledge around those. So we're going to continue doing that. Some things down the line that are coming are processed, lightly processed little fruit and veggie packs. And then we're also looking at beef in West Virginia. We're also looking at adding butter and some dairy products into those offerings as well. And we'll continue to add on additional things. So if you have more questions on that, just let us know. Opportunity number 2 was helping and mentoring those in our region. That has been the core of our mission since the inception of the Food Hub, realizing that farmers were having tobacco being bought out. They weren't able to provide tobacco to the market, which was a very large cash crop. And that's where the focus shifted to produce. So we're going to continue helping and mentoring those in our region, not just farmers, but also in the grow your own and learning landscapes, which is schools and teaching people how to grow their own food. But specifically, our staff at the Food Hub offers good agricultural practices gap training for any of you all that's familiar with that, for farmers who are either looking to review their best practices or for those looking to become certified. The class covers all points specific to gap certification. And the unique part about this is that we have developed a manual with some of the experts in the industry and in our area over food and farming. We've developed a gap manual that auditors are already familiar with and find very easy to navigate. So becoming certified, we kind of take that guesswork out of it for them. The farmer will leave the class ready to start implementing their training and their manual into practical use to becoming gap certified. So one of the challenges is a lot of times, and we're all guilty of this, right? Taking a class and learning something new, but then we don't really do anything with it. So we have kind of taken that out with that manual. That becomes the bridge for them to actually act on becoming GAP certified. And we do help them through that process. If they have questions, they can contact us. Or if they need a more customized hands-on training on their farm to get things set up, we do offer those services as well. Upon request, we can coordinate harmonized GAP and FSMA training, either with our staff or with one of our partners, again, kind of based on location and what your needs are. So it's very custom and it's very tailored because we truly want to just mentor. We don't want to just give you a bunch of information and leave you out on your own because it can be very overwhelming. So our grower manager and our ag education team can help with continued mentoring through our beginner farmer program that does scale up, and the larger scale crop production planning as well. So we kind of try to cover the gamut here with, if you put something in the ground and it grows, we can help you kind of troubleshoot based on your needs. So there is contact information there. If you're looking for food safety, it's specifically going to be Robin Robbins. If you're looking for large scale needs, that's going to be Adam Pendleton. If you're looking for ag education, that's going to be Jenny Root. I have no idea what happened with this particular slide. I will make sure that whenever you guys get it, it's a little bit more cohesive there, so you know exactly who is who on that part. So opportunity number 3 is probably what we talk about the most at AH currently. It is our beef market expansion. So our 2023 goal is to increase regional food security and increase food hub sales volume, profit, and the number of year-round offerings benefiting customers, farmers, and the local economy. So not only are we working with different markets, wholesale, direct to consumer, we also recognize the need for food insecurity needing beef options as well. We've done a very good space of creating food boxes that have produce. We did just have back in around Thanksgiving in November, the first beef to a local food pantry. And I feel like that is going to be a large space that we're going to be able to be in with the beef to not only offer healthy produce options, but also some healthier protein as well. Not to mention it's just delicious, and who doesn't want the beef that's locally grown? So AH also wants to play a critical role in making deliveries to small rural purchasers. That means school systems, smaller retails, smaller grocery store chains that have a few locations, and making sure that that's financially viable. So going back to that analysis of the feasibility analysis for the trucks, we'll be constantly looking through that with every delivery over the next year to really see what's working on the nonprofit side to make sure that we can sustain the program moving forward. So we want to increase the volume, the value and volume of each delivery, ensuring mid-tier markets are serviceable over the long term. So produce has probably the smallest profit margin in the industry whenever we're talking about market value. And one of the things to offset that so that we can continue to do produce more profitable in the future is to add that beef to the truck specifically. And because cattle and beef and proteins have a higher profit margin, it just makes financial sense if we have the truck on the road to make sure that there's also beef being delivered to those particular customers. And then we're going to lay the foundation for a substantial expansion of regenerative agricultural practices and the premium pricing connected to them by end use customers and major retailers. So before we go into what that means as far as the regenerative ag practices, I do want to mention that with this beef market expansion, we've recognized that this is its own brand, which is not something that we've done at the Food Hub prior to this, but we are actually creating and developing an entire marketing plan, making sure that this beef is its own brand, but also utilizing the resources that we're currently taking advantage of for marketing, like market consultants and things like that, that we're able to kind of make this our cookie cutter for what our produce line should look like and how it should be branded. And it will definitely help us as we bring on other value addeds to offset the cost of trucks, to have that template so that we're branding and we're in a space that brings customer satisfaction and customer trust as we kind of branch out into these other lines within the local food chain. So Katie, if you are ready to talk about regenerative ag and what's coming up for 2023 and your updates, I will pass it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brittany. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Commander. I'm the Agroforestry Director at Appalachian Sustainable Development. It's good to see some new and familiar faces at our event today. Brittany, can you go to the next slide? Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up our discussion talking about a fourth opportunity, certainly not the final, just maybe all we have time for today. And that's looking at intersections, interdepartmental intersections. So Brittany talked a lot about, and so did Kathleen, the vast amount of partnerships and how critical it is to have partnerships for collective impact with external partners. And this opportunity is really looking at interdepartmental partnerships. So ASD has had an agroforestry program that I manage since about 2010. And we've really tried to look at ways that that department can work with Appalachian Harvest to create more opportunities for farmers. So before we get into what those opportunities look like, I want to take a step back and maybe define what on earth agroforestry is within the regenerative agriculture space. That might be a new concept for a lot of folks. So when we think of and we envision maybe a traditional farm in the United States, we might see trees over here and crops over there and animals over here, all in their own separate areas. The purpose of agroforestry is to bring those things together intentionally and integratively. So it's incorporating trees into systems with crops or animals for both economic, social, and environmental benefits. So for example, looking at the green areas here in the center of this diagram, if we were to plant trees into a pasture with livestock, that would be an agroforestry practice called silvopasture. Let's say there are shade-loving crops that we want to sustainably grow or manage in the forest understory. That would be a practice called forest farming. And lastly, just as an example, let's say there's a field where you're growing herbaceous crops, and you want to plant rows of trees and shrubs spaced widely enough apart so that in between those rows of trees and shrubs, you can grow annual or perennial herbaceous crops in the alleyways. That would be called alley cropping. And so our agroforestry department at Appalachian Sustainable Development works with a network of farmers throughout Central Appalachia to help them adopt these practices. And this creates a lot of unique opportunities for partnerships interdepartmentally at ASD. And the first one I want to highlight is our Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub, which was founded in 2017 with some seed funding from the Appalachian Regional Commission's Power Grant that actually started the corridor project that Kathleen and Brittany were talking about. This sort of created out of a community need, right? So our agroforestry department, since 2010, we've been providing trainings to farmers and landowners on how to sustainably cultivate and manage forest botanicals or shade-loving crops in a forest farming system. A lot of these plants are native to Appalachia, like the black cohosh that you see in the photos here, and then the bottom right, American ginseng is probably one of the most iconic species that is native to Appalachia that's grown in the forest understory. You fast forward to 2017, and these are long-term perennial crops. The farmers that we trained back in 2010 are getting ready to harvest, and they're processing at a home scale using tiny tabletop dehydrators with multiple batches. They're realizing that their labor costs are through the roof. They're not making any money. They're having a hard time accessing markets because a lot of markets require high volume minimums, and maybe they can only produce 25 pounds, but a buyer needs 50. And they're having a hard time getting premium prices for products. So they came to us and said, hey, you have this food hub, right? And it's been working with produce farmers for a number of years. We have similar needs within the medicinal herb community. So could you potentially work with us to provide similar services? So in 2017, we created the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub. It's nested within the Food Hub facility in Duffield, Virginia. And it's really designed with the vision of creating a thriving and sustainable herbal economy in Central Appalachia, where the conservation of a number of these at-risk forest botanicals like American ginseng is achieved through profitable cultivation. And the key word is profitable, right? If it's not profitable to cultivate, there's no sense in farmers doing it. So in Duffield, wherever there was empty space within the food hub, we created this herb hub, and really to help medicinal herb farmers sustainably grow, harvest, process, and sell herbs to domestic and international markets that are grown either in a forest farming system or in an alley cropping system. So again, that integration and intersectionality between our agroforestry department. And we've been providing a number of services to farmers since inception in 2017. Seed to sale training. So it all starts with that foundational knowledge. When we have funding available from grantors, we're able to offer mini grants or cost share funding to help farmers offset the upfront startup costs for planting stock, which can be a barrier. And then we also offer shared use commercial herb processing equipment. So rather than every herb farmer in our area having to go out and buy this expensive equipment themselves or buy these small tabletop dehydrators that are just inefficient, we are able to utilize as a nonprofit grant funding to purchase this equipment to make it available to our farming community. And that's everything from the washing equipment. So there's a wash table in the photo on the top left, and it's a cement mixer, but it's used as our root washer in the upper right. And dryers of various sizes, from the Excalibur unit you see here all the way up to a 40-foot by 10-foot walk-in tobacco dryer that we have outside our facility. And most recently, hammer mill equipment so that we can reduce the particle size of material. And this is all designed for two things. A, to make sure that the farmers we work with can meet strict buyer specifications to avoid rejections. And B, we want to make sure that we're providing the equipment that farmers need for commercial scale that reduces their labor costs so that it can help improve their profitability. And the last service that we offer is much like the food hub, aggregation and marketing services. So if we have a buyer that needs 100 pounds, but we have only 4 farmers that with 25 pounds each, they can't access that market alone. But through aggregation, we can help them access that market. And we're doing so with domestic and international markets that really place a value on regenerative agriculture. They want to know that the herbs that they're purchasing are ethically and sustainably sourced, and they're willing to pay premium prices for that. So, for example, the black cohosh that's in this photo, traditionally, if it was wild harvested from the Appalachian Mountains, it might get anywhere from, maybe an average of $6 a dry pound right now. Whereas with forest farmed, sustainably cultivated and managed black cohosh, we've been able to get upwards of $45 a dry pound. So that really creates a financial incentive for farmers to sustainably cultivate these herbs using agroforestry practices like forest farming. We've also been fortunate enough through a USDA NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant to work with a number of farmers throughout Central Appalachia on establishing demonstration sites, both forest farming sites and then also alley cropping sites. So again, planting rows of trees and shrubs with herbaceous crops in the alleyways, like you see in the photos on the right with Sarah Barney at Among the Oaks Farm in Kentucky. We really wanted to look at how could we grow medicinal herbs using this system. And so over the past few years, we've been working with the USDA National Agroforestry Center and our partners up in Ohio with Rural Action, also establishing demo sites to create this new alley cropping publication that highlights these case studies in Appalachia. Oftentimes when you see photos of alley cropping, it might be in very, very flat terrain in the Midwest. And so we wanted to highlight that alley cropping is an agroforestry system that has great potential in Appalachia as well. And another project that we're super excited about that launched last year is in partnership with Dr. John Munsell at Virginia Tech with the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition. And it's a new training and workforce development certification program called Point of Harvest. Now, I mentioned that the Herb Hub has been providing training since 2010, largely in partnership with the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition. That has been training directed towards landowners. So folks who own forested land and can cultivate and plant and sustainably manage these at-risk forest botanicals in the understory. The challenge with that we saw as a big gap that we wanted to address is that when we look at the forest botanical value chain, most of these species, the American ginseng, the bloodroot, the golden seal, the black cohosh, are coming from the wild. They've been harvested from the Appalachian Mountains for the past 300 years. A lot of these species are in decline and at risk of extinction because of over-harvesting and habitat loss. And by only training forest farmers, much like Kathleen said at the beginning of this presentation, only working with organic farmers, you're only working with folks who are already there. And so we wanted to extend our training services to wild harvesters who are painstakingly going out in the woods for days at a time and harvesting these plants by hand to meet an insatiable market. And we wanted to provide training on a number of things. First is plant identification. So there's a big issue in the medicinal herb market with adulteration. So, you know, you might think you're harvesting black cohosh, but it might be a lookalike, like doll's eye. If you don't know how to properly identify it, that's being sold into the market. It can be a big, big issue. So we wanted to make sure everyone knew how to identify these plants that they're harvesting. We also wanted to make sure for sustainability that harvesters were well-versed in propagation methods and sustainable harvest methods, so that they're not over-harvesting these populations and they're able to replant seeds and replant rhizomes to ensure that these populations are here for generations to come, and that they can continue for generations to come to go back to those same populations and harvest sustainably over time. We also, in talking with stakeholders and developing this pilot project over, which started last year, pilot will end towards the end of this year, buyers were saying that they really wanted to make sure that folks got proper training on post-harvest handling, storage, and processing. So, you know, if a buyer gets material and it doesn't meet specification, they have to reject it, right? And so we really wanted to make sure that we provided training so that farmers or wild harvesters knew exactly how to process material to meet those specifications so that they could have a successful sale. There's a lot of opportunities that come out of this, right? I think plant conservation is huge. You know, if we can work with a network of wild harvesters who create the bulk of the supply for this industry on best practices, then we're making big, big changes, right? It's also a social benefits as well. A lot of wild harvesters, like I said, for black cohosh, $6 a dry pound. You're spending days in the woods harvesting, oftentimes in dangerous conditions, very steep hills. You're dealing with snakes and ticks. We wanted to make sure that harvesters were getting paid fair wages for their material that's being harvested sustainably. So through the Herb Hub, we're creating premium price markets where buyers are willing to pay more money for that sustainability assurance. And just lastly, you know, this is really the only training program available to wild harvesters. There's no other certification program like this right now. So it's really helping to create industry recognition and leadership and empowerment within the wild harvester community. And lastly, we're very excited to be a sub-awardee on a USDA Climate Smart Commodities grant with the Nature Conservancy and gosh, dozens of other partners throughout the United States, all the way to Hawaii. It's a little over a $60 million grant for all these partners, and ASD's role will be able to work with farmers in Central Appalachia to provide technical assistance and also direct financial assistance to help folks adopt alley cropping and silvopasture on their land. And so of the 60 million, about 40 million of that is actually going directly to farmers as direct financial incentive payments to help cover the cost of implementation of these practices. So $40 million, that's a lot, right? We're going to have a lot of acreage of agroforestry coming up over the next 5 years. So what are we going to do with it all, right? We're going to be hiring a climate smart commodities sales manager in year 3 of the project. We're about to kick off for year 1 in the next few months. And they'll be able to help develop markets and at premium prices for these commodities grown in agroforestry systems. So that could be, you know, expansion of medicinal herbs through our herb hub. It could be looking at different crops that can extend the seasonality of not only Appalachian harvests, but also for farmers, like woody cut florals that you see in the photos in the middle and the bottom right here, to really help it extend profitability throughout the season. And lastly, connecting back to the opportunity that Brittany and Kathleen mentioned with the beef market, we're going to be developing markets for silvopasture raised meat as well. And the market for silvopasture raised meat is really going to depend on branding, right? So we're going to be hiring this year a brand consultant to work with us over the next 2 years to develop a silvopasture raised meat brand that farmers can use. We can sell through Appalachian Harvest and other networks throughout the United States to really put a label on, you know, why would a customer pay more for, you know, conventional versus grass-fed versus another level up silvopasture, right? We really want to make sure that we're capturing higher profit margins for farmers as financial incentive for adoption of these amazing agroforestry practices. So in a nutshell, right, Appalachian Harvest, we've been continually looking for opportunities to expand our business model, looking for ways that we can increase partnerships, both externally and interdepartmentally, and obviously looking for ways that we can increase our services to directly meet the needs of farmers, whether it's produce or beef. You know, the opportunities are endless. But it's an evolution, right? We've been doing this since 2000. We have some things figured out. We're still on an uphill learning curve for many other things. And we just are very excited for all the opportunities that lie ahead. So with that, I'm going to open it up to see if folks have any questions. If we don't have time to get to all the questions, just note that our contact information is here. You're welcome to reach out to us after this meeting. Thank you so much.
Wow, lots of information. There's got to be questions. People should feel free to unmute themselves, or if you would prefer, put the question in the chat and we can moderate it.
Leslie, I'm going to drop the alley cropping case studies in Appalachia publication that I mentioned in the chat. So this way everyone has that direct link.
Thanks, Katie. So having been one of your long-term partners, I'm really fascinated by all the different partnerships that you guys navigate at so many different levels in terms of your work, you know, whether it's the Herb Hub, whether it's all the farmers and partners you work with to make the distribution network and the Food Hub Appalachian Harvest work, all these new distribution corridor partners. What lessons, I guess, have you guys learned to coordinate all these sort of different moving parts? We know that there's always challenges working with so many different entities. So I'm going to put you on the spot. What are some of the challenges, and what have you learned, I guess, through maybe some of the hard knocks of collaboration?
Well, I can start, and I know Katie has a whole different set, and I'm sure Brittany does too. I mean, I think with us, it's at ASD, we're just committed to it, to partnering, and partners are humans, and humans are challenging at times. And so I think just knowing that partnering can be hard, and just sticking with it. I think a lot of our grants have our partners as subrecipients, or our partners have grants with us as subrecipients. And so I think that kind of marries you a little bit and helps the, coordinating the work and keeping you together. And I'd also say that at ASD, we try to know when to lead and when to follow. We don't pretend to have all the answers to everything, and nor should we. It's unreasonable. And so, we're always happy to be partners and learn. And, ACENET's such a great example of sharing information with us. And, we would never presume to lead something that ACENET was an expert in. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Kathleen said and maybe just add that I think it's important when you're getting into a partnership to be realistic about your capacity. If you're starting a new project, you may have no idea what it's going to take, and you get halfway through and you're like, boy, this is a lot of work and I don't sure don't have the time for it. Right. So, but I think trying to be upfront, as realistic as possible about what you're able to contribute to a partnership, and try not to overcommit, because that's where I think some of the challenges and difficulties end up. I also think, through the partnerships that we've created through agroforestry with the Herb Hub and the Appalachian Beginning Forest Farmer Coalition, I think one of the keys is looking at where the expertise lies. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but that's the whole point of a collective impact partnership, is being able to bring in like an ACENET for value added assistance. Like, that's not our wheelhouse. That's not our expertise. Being able to bring folks from all walks of life to really help create a collective partnership that has big impact, I think is where one of the key areas lies.
And I think too, it's important to make sure that as you approach challenges or keeping it all together, expanding partnership connections, just always be in the space that change is inevitable, and that sometimes it's, you have to make those pivot points. And I think that, if you have the right partners on hand and you have those strong connections and there's open communications, the change is always going to be for the better. And those pivot points allow you to pivot quickly when a problem does arise or something needs to be addressed or a challenge gets thrown your way. And then also making sure that you're just not taking things so personally. Sometimes our passion does get in the way. We're all very passionate people. That's why we're all here. And sometimes taking that step back to realize it's for the good of the whole. And it's not anything necessarily personal if things don't necessarily go the way that you thought that they were going to go.
Thanks, you guys. Hey, Gabe, I'm wondering if you would unmute. You had a great question from New Roots Community Farm. Many of us in the distribution corridor count you guys as a partner. Can you just talk a little bit about your connection to this infrastructure piece?
Yes, I think Kathleen mentioned some of the West Virginia partners who have worked on aggregation distribution. We are a satellite aggregation distribution point in the Turn Row Southern Appalachian Farm Collective. And so we do service both producers as an aggregation location in Fayette County, Summers, Raleigh, Nicholas County of Southern West Virginia. And we also have provided, pickup points for consumers in the region also. We are kind of rethinking those partnerships a little bit because these things are always evolving, trying to figure out how to build a better mousetrap. But we do some market access work here for the producers in this region. And so we also anticipate operating an apprenticeship for producers this coming growing season. We'll have at least 2, depending on how grant funding shakes out. We hope to have 4, potentially 6-month apprenticeships that we hope to roll into a 12-month apprenticeship. But yeah, we operate an 82-acre demonstration production farm here in Fayetteville, West Virginia.
Thanks, Gabe.
Absolutely.
What about any other hub or facility managers? Crystal, it looks like you've got your hand up.
Sure. I just wondered, I'm familiar with everything and what's been on our minds a lot. I'm Crystal Cook Marshall. I'm one of the co-founders of Edge, and a lot of this discussion we've been having in our area. And we run up against this often, and I just was looking at a grant someone sent the other day, is that we work principally in McDowell County, West Virginia. We do work across the border also in Tazewell County, Virginia, but by comparison, Tazewell County is in another country, in terms of its infrastructure, resources, and that in our area, there's a grant we looked at, ask also for investors and also for industry partners and all kinds of other things. And that where we are is so stretched for even sort of basic kinds of services. We've been having a lot of conversation with some other interesting folks around, using other kinds of metrics to make the decisions about investment where we are. We can't compete with people who are in areas that have a lot of other resources. And I mean, I'm not talking about resources just like, money. I'm talking about basic services, having a hairdresser in the county, having, having a car wash in the county, I'm beyond what most people in other areas can even conceive of. And so what we're kind of, and we're moving forward, on the things that we're doing despite all of this. And so I just was curious about kind of the from an ASD perspective, the integration of places that are high needs, and also, how you decide whether a partner is worth it.
You're saying how you decide if a partner is worth it, or how
Yeah, the criteria for involving a partner. I mean, there are lots of little places, throughout the region. So, what criteria do you use to decide when somebody's, worth participating?
A lot of times it's a coalition of the willing. It's like, how do you make it work? So, when Brittany was talking about the partnership with God's Pantry, we didn't go out and say, hey, we're going to cherry pick you farmers here. It was that they expressed interest, and then we worked together to figure it out. So to me, it's more about interest and how we make it viable than anything. And just, what is it that both partners, or however many partners, can bring to the table to make it work? And I hear you, because we do some work in Tazewell County as well. And it is, it's one of the more remote places that's very sparsely populated, but also an amazing place that we really want to concentrate in. And, we've been developing some different partners there, and just kind of learning as we go. And, a lot of times it's getting the word out about what the opportunity is. And then whoever shows up, we try and figure it out.
Yeah, it seemed like Deb Roush had kind of a similar question. If you're starting to work with a new group and realize that there were gaps, especially in the sort of personal infrastructure, what's your approach? And then I see Martin has his hand up. We'll go to him next.
You said in personnel infrastructure, or just in infrastructure?
Yeah, I don't know. Deb, do you want to unmute? And I'm just reading what you put in the chat.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking more at the personal side of it. So there's the hardscape infrastructure, but then you've also got the softer side of the people and their skill sets and that. So when you notice there's gaps, what's your approach on how you're going about filling those or shoring them up so that there's an increased likelihood of success?
We've had a recent example of that, where one of our partners had just a lot of staffing challenges, and what our commitment was to do our very best to share our experiences and resources, and dedicate the time to help them help get through whatever issues might be causing some of those challenges, or to just offer, like, in another way of looking at it, like when we first started working in West Virginia in 2016, there were only 7 farmers that had food safety certification. And so we shared our manual that Brittany mentioned earlier because we knew that it had been effective with other farmers. So we shared it with Extension in West Virginia. So that so that's just an example of a gap that we felt could be pretty easily filled just because we were already doing it. I don't know if that helps.
Well, and I think too, hindsight's always 2020. You don't really know what you're getting into until you start having those working groups and moving things forward. And I think that Katie mentioned this earlier too. I think it's important before really you get into the weeds to make sure that expectations are known up front so that hopefully those types of challenges are at least addressed on the forefront before you start really making progress and then having to start and stop and then adjust. So setting those expectations and making sure that everybody you're working with in a partnership understands what their role is in that as well.
Well, thanks. Martin, quick
thank you.
question.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot a little bit, and I realize where we are on time. I think the big thing that we are trying to face or address is micro aggregation. So the farms that you're pulling out of Kentucky are of a particular size. We also know there are a lot of other farms who just are not in that position, right? So the thing to figure out is how do we dive into micro aggregation? And I'm not going to ask you but where do we start? Where do we start trying to work out the micro aggregation component of PAD?
Kathleen, do you want me to field that one or do you want me to? I have, it's all kind of new, right? That particular microaggregation conversation. And I think that relying on our partners in Kentucky to help us with that is going to be key. So behind the scenes, what you guys don't necessarily see all the time or what we didn't present on is that we recognized that we are another segment of customers or of farmers that we're kind of not servicing as well as that market garden, that middle section between they're not new beginner farmers, but they're not large scale farmers yet. And we're working together to figure out, because KCAR does a good job of connecting those markets or those farmers to those markets within that area so that there's not a need for us to go and pick up a large truck of their produce. And we're trying to figure out, how can Appalachian Harvest also do the same thing for our farmers in Virginia, but then we're also trying to figure out what the interest is on those farmers to scale them up enough to where a GAP certification and food safety makes sense for them. Because we have to have those certifications to be on our trucks and to be in our facility, to go into our markets. But then also, how do we help them in the meantime? How do we expand on what KCAR is already doing for those growers, and how do we market that a little bit better? So it's coming, and Martin, I think it's a great conversation, and I'll reach out to you if you want to kind of connect and we can kind of see what the push is there, that we can probably do some things with the upcoming growing season a little bit better, some just more ideas. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and again, sorry for the rabbit hole, but and I'm really not referring specifically to micro aggregation for Appalachian Harvest, just in general, right? There's a lot of production out there, and the demand is out there too, and that is the challenge I think we're facing. Anyway, sorry to open a can of worms at the last minute. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Martin. The slide is playing you off at this point. So I just want to sum up once again, thanking Kathleen, Katie, and Brittany. I know there's probably a lot of additional questions. All this information will remain on the CAN website, and you certainly should reach out to them. But we're going to segue now into the meat facility panel, and we have Annie Stroud, Adam Cody, Lexi Close, and Brent Lackey. as our presenters this morning. They're each going to introduce themselves. Some folks may have slides, some folks may not. We'll try and make sure that there's enough room for questions here at the end as well. I think we all recognize that meat processing has been a challenge throughout the region, but there's a lot of innovation and new solutions happening at this time. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide. And Annie, would you like to get us started? I think you're here somewhere. Annie has played many roles within our food system within Central Appalachia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Here we go. Okay, oh, and there I am. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Annie Stroud. I'm the administrative manager of Appalachian Abattoir, which is a USDA inspected slaughter and meat processing facility located in Charleston, West Virginia. It's about a 10,000 square foot facility. I've been with the project from the beginning. I actually was working at a consulting firm that helped write some of the reports they used to get the grant and then to build the building. And then when they actually received the grant, came on actually as project manager and managed the whole construction process, and have now transitioned into an administrative management role here at the new building. Do you need anything else for an introduction, Leslie, or do you want me to go ahead and talk?
That's great. Just talk.
Okay. All right, great. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about the project at this point, or is everybody going to get introduced first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so a little bit more about, I guess, I will try and speak louder. I see a note about that. Close to my computer as I can get here without being awkward. The project itself, so the parent company, as it will, is a company called Buzz Food Service, which is a USDA inspected meat processing facility and distribution company based out of Charleston, family run company. They've been around for, I believe, 65, 70 years or so. Started out doing a lot of grocery distribution, bought a small meat shop, partnered with the previous owner. And in the last 15 years, Dickinson Gould and his wife Angela have been running the company. They have really steered it towards higher end proteins. So meat, seafood. We have a partnership with a seafood company in Pittsburgh. And the main customer has been kind of food service, higher end eating establishments, resorts, those types of companies. And one of the things that, as a meat company in the state, we get a lot of calls from people over at Buzz, and I've been hearing a lot from customers, folks wanting to purchase local product, but having had kind of challenging experiences doing so, since the restaurant consumer especially is looking for consistency in a way that is really hard for individual producers to provide, and both in terms of supply and in terms of the actual portion cut of the product itself. Because one of the specialties that Buzz does, all of the meat that comes in pretty much is box beef from the Midwest, but it comes in and is perfectly portion cut, so you can buy 20 cases of exactly 8 ounce, whatever. So they have a really good understanding of the needs of that kind of a client, and kind of saw that piece. And at the same time, we also would have people calling wanting to sell us product, and we had tried in the past to purchase directly from farmers before, but had run into some issues with USDA inspected processing is hard to find, and especially USDA inspected slaughter and processing that is able to produce some of these more like wholesale type specs for food service. So anyways, a whole bunch of different factors kind of played into it. We actually got some help from Coalfield Development in putting together actually an abandoned mine land economic development proposal. I keep saying we, this is before I was there, but for for the slaughter facility, all along, well, actually you can see my thing all along these hillsides, we've got mine portals and things like that. So we were eligible for that funding source. So they wrote a grant, received funding, administered through the West Virginia State Department of Environmental Protection. And that's about the time that I came on as project manager. So the construction and design process took longer than expected, partially because we were doing it in the middle of the pandemic. I don't recommend that as a construction time frame if you can help it, but we were able to get everything done. They purchased a piece of property kind of right next door to our existing processing facility. Unfortunately, the lot was a little bit smaller than we wanted, so some of the wish list items didn't make it on there. But it is, like I said before, about 10,000 square foot facility. We were originally building it for capacity to do about 100 animals a week, measured in beef. We are probably almost there actually right now. The full staff, when we're fully up and running, is going to be around 30. We're still understaffed because I was listening and a little bit, people were talking about human infrastructure. One of the pieces that, has been a little bit of a struggle, less so than some other areas, is, building a full staff that's ready to go. We do have, I think we're at about 22 right now at the building, but the onboarding of that takes some time. At Buzz, we actually started a meat cutting apprenticeship program. So we have started that, but it's, a 2-year program before we get folks fully up and running. The staff here has been doing a really great job in learning fast, but, again, it's a little bit of a challenge, and it's a hard industry to keep people if they aren't very excited about what they're doing. And let's see, other updates here. A couple things just about the business model. We're doing a little bit of a hybrid business model here because we're a very large small plant, but in the world of plants, we're tiny still. And so we actually are kind of doing 3 different things because of our relationship with Buzz Food Service. So one is we're acting as a USDA inspected processor for local farmers. We've had, I think, over probably 100, 120 individuals bring us animals, mostly West Virginia, but a couple from Pennsylvania and Ohio and Virginia. So that's kind of our service work. A lot of plants will call this custom work, but because everything we do here is inspected, internally we call it service. So that's our service work portion. We have wholesale buying. So this is when I have a buyer counterpart at Buzz. He actually will call producers that have reached out that we've got on our list and say, hey, I need X amount of animals. We will process it essentially for Buzz as the customer, if that makes sense. So we'll buy in the animals, cut it to wholesale specs, so they will get an entire subprimal. We're not packaging individual steaks here, and they will process it just like they do any meat that comes in from IBP or anybody else, but as a local product line. And then the third piece that we do is what we're calling contract harvest. And that's kind of like service customers, except it's usually a much larger customer. And we have 2 main customers right now that are bringing us larger lots. And the spec they're wanting is that wholesale spec. So we're cutting subprimals, packaging them in cases for them. And those are typically fresh. And they are shipping those on to their respective customers, who are then either they're portioning it and doing the work someplace else. We did invest in some significant labeling and traceability software. We also had the opportunity to work with West Virginia Cattlemen's Association to write a grant to launch Mountain State Ground Beef Program, which is a local branded beef program that comes through this facility. We do all the slaughter for that. And that was able to help cover some of the costs of that traceability program. And that allows us to essentially have all of the labeling required to get into some of the larger retailers. So Mountain State Ground Beef is in, Piggly Wiggly's, some IGAs, Shop and Saves, a whole variety of retailers, because we are able to offer kind of like the recall capabilities of a larger facility thanks to that software. So I could probably, I don't know how long you want me to talk, Leslie. I know I could probably keep going. My I have too many screens, so I don't have a clock in front of me.
Yeah, no, you're doing great. So where do you think you're headed in the next year? I mean, what is the next 12 to 24 months look like?
Yeah, so I think right now what we've been focused on is doing our service work, and then we developing these two kind of contract harvest clients, because the service work is a little bit easier to get people trained up on, because the core group of our staff did come over from Buzz. So we actually brought some people with experience from the Buzz meat shop into our cutting room here. So they've got the portion control, smaller stuff down. And we've had to spend a lot of time training on, whole subprimal specs. And honestly, a big thing that for the larger customers that we've had to do is actually training on the trim specs, because the trim is a significant portion of every animal. And for a larger producer, they're not grinding it, they're actually selling the chunks of meat properly. So we've actually had to do a lot of training and, testing and more training and fat testing and more training to get our staff where they kind of understand what that spec looks like. So for us right now, the next couple months are kind of focused on getting some of those things dialed in a little bit more. I think probably what we'll see is as we keep adding staff, because the goal is, in our experience, it works better to only try and onboard 2 or 3 people at one time. We've tried a couple larger groups, and it's just it's challenging for the existing staff and management to make sure that a larger group of folks who don't know what they're doing aren't messing anything up. It's really what it comes down to. And, give them the attention and training that they need to feel part of the team and like they're contributing in a useful way. So, again, we're on this kind of like 4 to 6 weeks, onboarding a couple people here and there, hoping to get to full staff this year, which will allow us to run both floors simultaneously, probably most days of the week. Because right now what we're doing is we're only slaughtering 2 days a week, because our slaughter floor, and you'll see this at any facility, the slaughter floor can process a lot more animals than your cutting rooms can. It's almost a 2 to 1 at least ratio. So right now the fabrication floor really needs to be open 4 days to cover our harvest, 2 days, which is 6 days, which is more days than there are in the week. So right now we actually are running the floor. Today, actually, we have both floors open. But we just need a couple more staff to make that a little bit more sustainable. So we're working on onboarding that. We'll probably have both floors running, I'm sure, by the end of the year. And one thing that I also see, we started out doing a lot of wholesale buying at the beginning, because we were using those animals because we owned them as a training opportunity, right? It didn't matter if somebody accidentally cut a ribeye in half, because it was something, it mattered. It's not great, but it was our product. So we actually did a lot of wholesale buying first off when we first started, until we got staff trained up. And then as we got busy, fall, of course, is a really busy time for service work. We actually kind of tapered off our wholesale buying just because we were too busy with everything else, and the staff capacity that we had at that time. So we're anticipating that we will start wholesale buying again, probably, my guess is this summer, for food service type customers, now that we have the staff to be able to handle that along with our existing work. The only exception to that is the ground beef program, which we are running currently, and we bring them in every 2 or 3 weeks at this point.
Yeah, wow, it really underscores the human capital piece. I mean, I think there's such a focus now as we scale up across the region, whatever processing, aggregation, or distribution is happening. We have to really attend to the workforce component, the training for a skilled workforce.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Annie. I hope you can stay with us for a little bit, maybe watch the chat for additional questions. But we're going to go north now and go to Adam Cody, who is our food enterprise coordinator at AceNet. The title does not really serve all the roles that Adam plays. And again, many of you know him because aside from all his responsibilities here at AceNet and our 2 facilities, he works regionally and nationally as well. So Adam, you're up.
All right. right, thank you, Leslie. Can everybody hear me okay? I got this fancy new recording set up and it's my first time using it on a Zoom call. So, okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay, well, I'm gonna share my screen. I've got a little presentation I put together. So let's see if I can make this happen. Whoopsie daisy. That's the wrong one. Slideshow. Okay. Can everyone see my slideshow screen?
Yes.
Thank you. An audio response is what I was looking for. So thank you to whoever that was. So again, my name is Adam Cody. Thank you for the introduction, Leslie. And my title is Food Enterprise Coordinator at AceNet. It means that I work directly with all of our food entrepreneurs and sort of assist them in all their needs. So everything from the intake process to scheduling in our incubator kitchen spaces, product development, and sort of everything in between. And beyond that, I do my best to get out there, do trainings, do workshops, and sort of connect with the national, regional and national infrastructure that exists for our type of facility, the mixed use kind of shared use kitchen operations. But today, the reason I was invited was to talk about meat processing at AceNet. Meat processing is a fairly new sort of part of AceNet's operations. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is sort of walk you through our history with it, where it started, why it kind of brought us to the point where we decided to expand and really develop that part of our programming, and then sort of some challenges and maybe some future goals for our meat processing endeavors. So first, talk about meat processing at AceNet in the past, specifically at the Food Venture Center, which is our name for the sort of home base, the Athens food enterprise operation, the shared use kitchen in Athens. So here in the picture, we have the owner of a company called Pork and Pickles, Becky Clark, who's doing some butchering in that space. And a quick shout out while we have a moment as well. Becky is a chef in Athens, and she was just nominated for a James Beard Award for Best Chef in the Midwest. So that's pretty amazing. It doesn't really have anything to do with this, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to shout her out. But she came to us looking for commercial space to butcher whole hogs. Our space was not fully inspected for meat processing. However, we did have a commercially licensed kitchen. And as I move on to the next slide here, there is something that exists called the retail exemption in meat processing that I think is a very useful tool for sort of just starting out butchers, farmers, people that want to do their own meat processing, but maybe do not have access to a fully licensed and inspected meat processing facility. So the retail exemption allows small producers to process raw animal products without the benefit of oversight by the Division of Meat Inspection. Okay, and this is how it's written in the Ohio Department of Agriculture Food Code. But I do want to make clear that it seems like there's some version of this in most states across the Central Appalachian region. I know there is in West Virginia, and it seems like this is fairly standard. And it might be a little bit different as far as some of the bylaws that accompany it. But this is how it operates in Ohio. So a couple of things to go with that. The animal must have been slaughtered at an ODA or USDA inspected facility before any further processing. Process is inspected by the ODA Division of Food Safety, and the end product must be sold directly to the end user. Okay, so that's kind of the biggest component of this, which means it's great for a lot of up and coming butchers, meat processors. If you're selling directly at the farmer's market, perfect, that works out just fine. If you're selling directly off your farm, perfect, that works out just fine. The trouble comes in when you try to enter some of those retail markets, wholesale markets. That's sort of the biggest encumbrance to this retail exemption. It also does allow for up to 25% of gross sales for each product to be sold directly to institutions such as restaurants or hospitals or facilities such as that. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. There's also a cap of, I believe, $100,000 in sales on this rule as well. But we found that it was a great kind of option for some of our beginning users who wanted to do some, real artisanal value-added meat processing, and maybe did not have the need to sell wholesale or to sell across state lines, which is a part of this as well. You cannot sell across state lines. So I talked about some of those limitations. The regulatory limitations, again, lack of access to wholesale and retail markets, limited access to restaurants and institutional buyers, also a fewer number of products that can be produced, things like smoked, fully cooked products, cured products, nothing across state lines, which, here in Athens, we're 30 minutes from the West Virginia border, not too far from Pennsylvania either. So that limits our market opportunities. And just having that stamp of inspection, of federal or state inspection, definitely adds a sort of legitimacy or just a consumer kind of confidence when you have that on the finished product. And then in terms of the processing space, there's limitations there as well. We're a shared use kitchen. We have a lot of things that were being made in that space. There were days when you could come to the Food Venture Center and, Crumb's Bakery would be bagging up some granola. There might be a caterer in there doing 100 different things. And then Becky would have, a whole hog over there on the butcher counter. That would all be happening in the same space. So that took a lot of work to make sure cross-contamination was not happening. And it made it a little bit more difficult for sure on a daily operational basis. Huge need for dedicated meat processing equipment, and the functionality of the Food Venture Center made appropriate cleaning challenging. It was just a lot more effortful than maybe it would be in a meat processing space, in addition to storage concerns as well for large whole animal or primal cuts. Beyond that, and another need that we found was just a limited number of processors in Southeast Ohio. You can see my artfully drawn frowny face right there in Athens County. We don't have any. We don't have any in Athens County, unfortunately. And this map indicates that we are surrounded by a number of them, but the ones that do exist, and this isn't a unique problem to Athens or Southeast Ohio by any means, as I'm sure many of you know. But the ones that do exist tend to have, long waiting periods to get in. You better, get on the list sooner than later. And also just a sort of lack of customization, from processor to processor, where your finished product is going to end up looking a lot like the farmer down the road as well. So those are some things that kind of popped up as we were doing some initial research around what would be the value here if we decided to really go after some of the funding to make this happen. So this project, once we did decide to dive in, was funded from several sources: USDA, the Appalachian Regional Commission, the Nelsonville Osteopathic Heritage Foundation. Between those three entities, we were funded for about $240,000. And then AceNet itself invested about $75,000 into the project. That's the build out of this space. It was the equipment and everything that went into making this facility operational. So the final build out we call the Food and Farm Enterprise Center. It is divided into two separate production rooms that are equal in space and footing. They're about 450 square feet on each side. So Annie mentioned a small, a medium to small space. We're a very small space when it comes to working with processors and production space. It is fully licensed and inspected, our meat processing space, by the ODA Division of Meat Inspection. We have approved HACCP plans for raw, intact, non-intact, heat treated, not fully cooked, not shelf stable products. Weekly utilization by two producers. Pork and Pickles is no longer operating in that space, so this slide does need to be updated. But Farm on the Ridge is another local farmer who uses that space to do pork products. And there's a list of some of the equipment that we have here located within that space as well. And then we have a produce processing side to the Food and Farm Enterprise Center, also licensed and inspected by ODA, FDA. Pickle products, some cheese work, some botanical and dietary supplements. One of our most recent users of that space is doing some CBD products, gummies, things like that. So it's kind of a cool new direction that we're going in, and some farm to school as well. We work with a couple local organizations, partner organizations such as Rural Action and Community Food Initiatives, who use that space to do some produce processing and then resell to schools in the area. And we have some equipment to support some of that work in that space. So here's some pictures of our meat processing facility, not long after opening. So we designed it, to address some of those needs that I identified in an earlier slide. Cleanup is much easier. We have a trench drain running down the center of the room. Ideally, there's a lot of animal fats, grease. We have a grease trap that supports the waste that occurs from these production runs. You can see the bandsaw there, a large scale vacuum sealer. One of the great pieces of equipment that I don't have pictured here is our Hobart scale and printer. Essentially, folks can lay their finished products onto this printer and it will print out a label with the inspected seal on it, with the pricing on it. All that's kind of formatted into the unit, and it makes for a lot of opportunities for customization, and makes the process just go a lot smoother when it comes to the final packaging and labeling step, which, as anyone who operates one of these facilities knows, the faster that you do all that processing, the better, just to support temperature needs for the meat products. Here's a picture from our first production, Farm on the Ridge running some of their sausage. And now I'd like to talk about some of the surprises and challenges that we have encountered in operating this space. So labeling was something that we identified as the biggest initial hurdle that maybe we didn't anticipate. Letters of guarantee, labels for each and every ingredient, statement of identity, common name of products, the turnover time that we were encountering with the label approval process just ended up being longer up front than we expected. Same went for the amount of required staff time. As the HACCP certified individuals, Chris Kolke, who's on AceNet staff, or myself, one of us has to be present and maintaining production logs during each and every run in that facility. The inability to ship across state lines, this is something that we were still running into. We were inspected and licensed by ODA, but that still meant products had to stay within Ohio. The inspector has to stop by. That's something that is probably expected for any inspected meat processing facility. But they have to stop by on each production day, even if we have somebody coming in to do 40 pounds of sausage, with a few exceptions. The lack of available hours. State inspectors' open hours are 8:30 to 5:30 Monday to Friday, and if we're outside those hours, you got to pay those people pretty well, about time and a half. And there was less interest among the farming community than we expected. So many times I would have conversations with farmers, explain the concept of the space, and their eyes would light up, and they would ask, "Okay, great. When can I drop off my animal?" And that's when I'd explain, "Well, you have to do the butchering, you have to do the processing too." And more often than not, there was barriers there. They don't have the time. Obviously, they're farmers. They don't have maybe the skill set to do the butchering, to do the processing. And then also the ability to specifically just do raw and no ready-to-eat products in our production room because of concerns with listeria. Our inspectors have made it clear repeatedly that if we want to do ready-to-eat products, we would need to build out a separate dedicated space for that process. And time again, we have meetings with potential users of that space who want to make jerky. They want to do fully cooked products. And we just do not have the infrastructure to do that at the moment. So one big step that we did take is working with the USDA, FSIS on the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program. So CIS program promotes the expansion of business opportunities for state inspected meat and poultry operations. Essentially what it does is it allows state inspected plants to operate as federally inspected facilities, right? So that means that we can ship across state lines or even internationally. The day-to-day operations of the plant do not change, which means we're working with the same inspectors that we worked with from day one. Ohio is currently one of 8 states, and I don't know if that's changed at all recently. I think I last updated this about a year ago, but from that time, I know Ohio is one of the states that was currently participating in the program and was actually the first state to sign the agreement. West Virginia is actually one of 27 states that meets the FSIS requirements for at least equal regulatory guidelines, but have not yet signed an agreement with USDA to take part in the CIS program. So there you can see kind of on the map, 8 of the states that are starred there. I don't have them all in my head, but I believe Indiana, Illinois are a few of them, are actually fully prepared for CIS. And then 27 are the ones that we see here, meet the at least equal to guidelines, but for one reason or another have not yet reached an agreement with USDA to take part in this program. So if you are in any of these states and you're not quite there yet, maybe speak to some stakeholders, some people with your Department of Ag, and see what can happen to take this next step. So finally, I believe this is my last slide. What are some things that we can do to respond, some challenges that we can overcome, and some goals and kind of dreams for the future. I will say that we now have a much, much better understanding of the labeling process and a working relationship with our inspector and district ODA supervisor that has led to a far quicker turnaround time and efficient process to getting labeling approved. We did earn our CIS stamp of inspection, June of 2020. So that was a huge, huge step for us, something that we're super excited about to add further value, to our space to allow our users to ship across state lines. We continue to encourage our in-house processors to become HACCP certified themselves, just so it takes the onus off us, and we think it's important for these individuals to have more ownership over their process. My real dream, to really increase utilization of this space and something that would add so much value, I think, is really going out and finding what I would call a co-packer or a co-butcher, an individual who starts a business working with local farmers where they can just drop off their animal, inspected, slaughtered animal, and have them do, customized, artisanal, really high quality sausage, cuts, whatever, but working directly with the farmers. And then phase 2, is something that we're constantly on the lookout for funding wise, is to build out that space further, a new smoking, curing, kind of fully cooked, ready to eat space, to continue to offer new options to current and future users as well. That's all I got.
Thank you, Adam. And again, always feel free to reach out to us. Shameless infomercial for AceNet. Follow us on our social media, or Megan Loveland does an incredible job as our communications guru. So you can, if you want to see videos of these facilities, or more images from some of our clients using these facilities, that's a great way to access. So let's welcome Lexi Close next. Adam, if you can stop sharing your screen. Lexi is with ARC&D. I'm not sure, Lexi, if you have slides or not, but why don't you just take it away?
I did whip together some slides, so I will.
Okay.
Don't judge me on the quality of this presentation.
Yep,
yeah. All right. Slideshow from beginning. Okay. Is this showing up for y'all?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I work for the Appalachian Resource Conservation and Development Council in Johnson City. So we are a nonprofit, mainly working in food and agriculture, but we are partnering with the Appalachian Producers Cooperative. This is a farmer-owned cooperative, and we have acted as their fiscal sponsor, their nonprofit fiscal sponsor, while they are getting all of their kind of legal entity and financial stuff figured out. And we've also become fairly heavily involved in the project itself. Sorry if I make weird noises with my throat. I've been pretty sick the last few weeks, thanks to my disease vector children. So just excuse me. But so the APC is going to be building a new USDA inspected meat processing facility in Washington County. There is, I think, as in many parts of Appalachia, a severe lack of processing capacity in this region. When COVID hit, some farmers were looking at 18 to 24-month wait times on processing in the region. I think that wait time is still over a year at this point. So even though things have gotten a little better, there's still a huge need for new processing, meat processing in the region. This facility will do 100 to 125 head a week, mainly in beef also, but some pork and lamb as well. So it's not going to completely solve the problem, but I think it's going to make a pretty good dent in it. And it's basically going to double, the one facility is going to double the processing capacity in the region. We have, I think, 3 other small USDA inspected facilities in the region. So this one facility will be the same capacity as those 3. So this is a farmer-owned cooperative. It is the first farmer-owned cooperative to be founded in Tennessee in over 50 years. It's been a very interesting legal process because it's been so long since this type of cooperative was incorporated in Tennessee. There's no one alive today that knows the exact process of starting a farmer-owned cooperative in Tennessee under Tennessee laws. We've had to seek legal counsel from folks in Ohio and Minnesota, where there's a lot more institutional experience with cooperative startup. Tennessee doesn't have really great laws for cooperatives. And so there are other cooperatives that have started in Tennessee, not farmer-owned ones, but just kind of like grocery store cooperatives or other kinds of cooperatives. And most of them are actually incorporated out of state, like in Minnesota, for example, even though they operate only in Tennessee. But we have made it work. And we are officially a legal cooperative, farmer-owned cooperative in Tennessee as of quite recently. So, and it was important for the original group of partners that the business be run as a cooperative. Many of the members are a part of the existing farmers cooperative system in Tennessee, which operates a lot of feed, fuel, and farm supply stores in each county in the state. And these businesses primarily serve and benefit farmer owners of the cooperative, and profits are put back into the farm community. And that was a really important part of this process. But the other side is that cooperatives are able to access federal and state grants to a degree that, an exclusively private business is not. And this especially means USDA and Tennessee Department of Agriculture grants. So far, we expect grant funding to cover about half of the 10 million or so construction and startup costs for the facility. So one of the really neat things, and the thing that has really gotten this project moving, I don't think this would have happened without it, but Washington County, where we're located, has actually invested $2 million of their $25 million ARPA allocation, American Rescue Plan Act funding, as seed money for the facility. So far we've been able to leverage this. We have an ARC Power grant, and we're in the running for an MPEP, the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program grant. That's not been finalized yet, but it's looking pretty good. So this, thanks to the Biden administration, there's actually a lot of funding available right now for meat and poultry processing expansion for new facilities. And advance the slides. Oy, why is it not? No, I'm on the right slide. Can you guys not see the slides?
No, like
think
we
Lex-
can
We're
see
looking at
your
the PowerPoint, not your slides.
yeah.
We see your cover slide.
Oy.
We're looking at your actual PowerPoint program, not the presentation.
I think
Why
you
is it
just need to
doing that?
change. You just need to
All right.
change which screen is being shown.
All right. I have no idea how to do this. Why is it?
maybe, Lexi, if you stop sharing your screen and then click on your PowerPoint and share screen again. Oh, there. Yep. Maybe I spoke too soon.
Criminy. All right, now
We know you've done all this hard work on your PowerPoint, so.
well, something. All right. What do you see now? Okay, display settings. Here we go.
That's good.
That's it.
It's good.
That's it. You got it.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, where was I? All right. So we have a ARC Power Grant, MPEP. This has been a really amazing time to be starting a new facility because of all this funding coming in right now from the USDA. I think the USDA was putting in almost $1 trillion for expanding of meat and poultry processing. So MPEP was one of those. We are hoping to apply for the Tennessee Department of Agriculture has more ARPA funding at the state level. They have not yet released when these grants are coming out, but they've said that there's going to be grants up to 1 million available. So we're hoping for that. And then there are a few other smaller USDA grant opportunities, like the value added producer grant, the local LFPP that we may or may not apply for. So just a little bit about meat processing in Tennessee. I'm sure this is fairly similar across Appalachia. 94% of the cattle that are raised in Tennessee are sold and shipped out of state for finishing and processing. So this means farmers are selling calves at commodity prices. Consumers are buying, meat at retail prices. So, a farmer might get $600 to $900 for a calf, whereas the retail value of that meat is somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000. So, there's a lot of value that farmers can capture, especially through this cooperative model, where we're cutting out the middlemen between farmers and consumers. So I'm looking through my notes. Sorry. So it will be a USDA inspected facility. I think we're going to start offering a lot of custom, fee for service. Well, I shouldn't say custom, fee for service slaughter, USDA inspection. So farmers will maintain control over the livestock and the meat through the whole process. But then over the first year or two, we'd like to switch to a model where we're doing about 50% fee for service processing and 50% where the cooperative actually is purchasing cattle from local producers, processing, and then selling the meat at retail and wholesale outlets. And this is going to involve a lot of work with local farmers in order to create a pipeline of cattle with the proper genetics to maintain, choice and prime carcass quality very consistently. So that maybe what we apply for an LFPP grant for is to work on getting that pipeline going. Yeah, so finishing a cow locally requires a good bit of infrastructure for farmers. However, one of the things we're going to be building on is that a lot of this infrastructure already exists in the county at dairy farms. So in the 1980s, there were 100 operating dairy farms just in Washington County, and today there are only 4. However, a lot of these farms still have that infrastructure that that can do the kind of feeding necessary to finish a 12 to 1,400 pound steer for processing. A lot of these farmers are now running cow-calf operations, but they could switch to finishing cattle, if there's a local market. So we've had a lot of interest from these folks, and we're hoping to build more on this to create that pipeline for us. This will primarily be grain-fed cattle. I think there is a fairly strong market for grass-finished, but a lot of our producers are in the grain-fed model themselves. So I think we're going to have to rely on consumer demand to kind of shift the producer mindset a little. on that, although it does take almost twice as long to finish a grass-fed cow as a grain-fed one. And there can be some issues with the carcass quality on grass-fed that the facility would have to overcome in order to produce a high-quality product. So, but I guess the upshot is that consumers are willing to pay more for this generally, although we don't necessarily know about the consumers in Northeast Tennessee if they're that interested in grass-fed products. I know, if we were to go into Western North Carolina or into Knoxville or some of the larger cities in the area, we might be able to have a more expensive grass-finished product for those markets. But that's just something that the facility is going to have to determine and do some market research on. We had some difficulty finding land for this facility. There's specific zoning. I think there's only 2 zones that are allowable for meat processing in Washington County. And there's not very many parcels of land with that existing zoning on it already. We encountered a whole lot of resistance to rezoning. And so we had initially wanted to be in the county's industrial park, but there was not a suitable lot available for the facility. So then we found a farmer that was willing to sell us a piece of land that was directly adjacent to the industrial park. And it should be, under normal circumstances, fairly easy to shift zoning on a piece of land if it's adjacent to the zone that you want to shift. However, this is a meat processing facility, so it immediately there's a lot of, not in my backyard NIMBY folks out there. So we encountered a lot of resistance. However, we did find this piece of property, which is located actually across the highway 11E from the industrial park, that already has the correct zoning on it. It's currently a giant clay pit, which is kind of a good thing because it's already heavily disturbed land. That means a lot of our environmental review process for the MPEP grant is going fairly smoothly because it's already been disturbed. So there's not any pristine endangered bat habitat or whatever on this piece of property. So we don't currently own the land. The land's under contract. We don't own it yet. We're hoping to close on it in April. We're hoping all these kind of grants wrap up and are finalized by April. We've just initiated the architectural and engineering drawings. A couple of weeks ago, we got started on that with an architectural firm. So hopefully we are about 3 months out from being able to put the project out for bidding. And then also be able to break ground starting this summer. So that is, I think, where we're at. Here's just another picture of what the facility footprint will be on this piece of property and what the facility is going to look like. This is the preliminary drawings. This is not the final one yet. So we're getting there. Yeah. All right. I think I'm done. I don't need to share all that stuff. So
again, all these slides will be made available.
Yeah.
So thanks. I mean, what an amazing project. So just to keep us on time, we'll keep saving questions or comments. Please put them in the chat. We've been to West Virginia, Ohio, and Tennessee. Now we're going to go to Kentucky, and Brent from K-Card is going to share what's happening in Kentucky. Thank you, Brent.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. And then I don't have any slides prepared. I apologize. It was put this together at the last minute, but I do. But
no worries.
Basically, okay. Well, mainly we want to talk about what with K-Card, what we've seen in meat processing over the last couple of years, and what the state is. How our K-Card is responding in the state. Has done this in the last couple of years. As you all know, when COVID hit, meat processing went crazy. What was at the time probably a 6 to 8 week wait time for most of farmers around the state to get into a meat processor. Quickly went to 6 to 12 to 18 months in many cases. So since April of 2020, K-Card has received over 200 inquiries of people wanting to start their own meat processing plant as a result of what they thought would be the new demand or expand their current meat processing plant. Obviously, not all those things come to fruition, but that it shows you the demand of services that K-Card has had and the demand that we've had in that time period. When the demand for our services for new meat processing, when you recognize those other needs, immediately K-Card did a couple of things. One, we tried to create a couple web pages on our website that had resources dedicated for people who wanted to start meat processing or who were looking to market meat themselves. And we try to gather resources from around the country to do that. I think the niche meat processing group has a lot of really good beginning resources for beginning processors. We also made sure people were how to get in contact with Dr. Greg Renfro in our state, who is the state extension specialist, who knows who works with meat processors, who offers some different weekend classes on cutting meat. And Greg's just a great resource. We want to make sure people were aware of how to contact him. And we also try to put together like a template for anybody wanting to start a meat processing plant of this is kind of what you should expect, a cash flow template. Here are the things that you need to think about. Here's what here is kind of an overview document. This is kind of an idea of what is going to, different pieces of equipment that you're going to need, the size of the facility you're going to need, and then go through that template and start filling out and realizing how many animals were going to be necessary to make that thing cash flow. Because meat processing is one of the challenges it has is it's a very capital intense business. So you have to you can't open up a plant for just to run a few cattle a week. You got to be able to know that, make sure you design that thing to scale, having that worry, and making sure that's an issue. When the meat processing demand happened, and one of the reasons that meat processors couldn't just automatically accommodate other new meat processing plants is, as many of you know, there's two primary bottlenecks when you look at the facility. A is your labor. I mean, how much labor can you access, and how efficient is your labor in moving and cutting up that meat? But the second big bottleneck that you just can't overcome overnight is how much space, how much cooler space and hanging space you have at that facility. The amount of rail space you have determines how many animals in a week's time period that you can think about justifying that processing in that week's time period. So one of the things that we work with the state, with the Kentucky Ag Development Board, which we're very fortunate to have, is to develop some programs. And we provide suggestions, but they took the lead on this. But they took, what they've developed was a meat processing investment program that they kept active for 2020 and 2021. And in that investment program, there was 3 or 4 different levels. The first level was that they created just a cash incentive for anybody that could document what they were doing pre-April 2020. If they found ways to expand, to get more animals that were processed through USDA inspection through labor or overtime or whatever, then there was a cash payment made to those processors on a per head basis. But then the big things they did was they created different levels. Was, if there was just a simple piece of equipment that was $50,000 or under, that would help improve their efficiency of their plant, there was called a level 2 funding. And that didn't require a business plan. That just basically said, some documentation on what this equipment would do, what you thought it would happen. And that was open to USDA processors and those who do just custom exempt processing. And then they created what they called the level 3 funding, which was current USDA inspected plants, but looking to expand to be able to go from the capability of maybe processing 20 beef a week to 30 beef a week or something of that nature. And it allowed them to, use that for equipment to expand their facility. And it only required a 25% match. They were willing to provide up to 75% of those funds. And then finally, they created what they call the level 4 funding. And then with that level 3, the maximum that a processor could get was $250,000. And then the level 4, also they capped it out at $250,000, but that was for new processors or somebody buying an existing plant that maybe was about to go out of business, or was a former custom plant that they were wanting to transition into a USDA plant. Some of the requirements though with these new plants was that they had to work with K-Card or a third-party entity to develop a business plan to make sure the numbers lined up and were thought out well. Secondly, the Ag Development Board required them to work with a meat processing consultant who would come in and analyze their plans and make sure they understood what was necessary from an equipment standpoint, but also what, the food safety was a really big concern of a lot of leaders in the state, to make sure that you want to make sure you're producing a safe product. And lots of times those HACCP plans and those food safety plans could be often ignored as so I want to make sure that those things were done correctly. So that's kind of the basic plan. And those programs lasted through 2021. Now in 2022 and through 2023, and then we're going into 23, the Ag Development will continue to invest in new plants, but there's no set aside funds for that. They set aside funds for that in that time period. Now, and that's from June of 2020 through into 2022, the Ag Development Board invested in over 43 either in existing or new meat processing plants in the state of Kentucky. There was over $8.6 million has been invested in these plants. You've got 10 new USDA plants that have been approved, that 8 have opened, 2 are still under construction. You have had 4 plants that were custom only at the time that are now USDA inspected, and you had 16 existing USDA plants that have been able to expand their capacity as a result of this funding. One challenge that we have in Kentucky is we still do not have a lot of poultry processing plants. At the time of COVID happened, we had 3 plants in the state that offered USDA inspection of services for farmers for fee for service or custom processing on USDA inspection. After the demand of the different things, that one of those plants stopped offering poultry services, so we were down to 2. We have a new plant that just opened up in late summer 2022. That's where we're going to expand in Eastern Kentucky and Moorhead, that will be offering processing services for poultry. But still, a challenge is we don't have the probably amount of poultry processing services that we would like to have for our pasture poultry producers in the state. In that time period, KCARD worked with 37 of those plants to help them develop their business plans, to help them think through, to make sure their numbers lined up, to make sure those things were where they wanted to be. When you look at, I think we're just now starting to see this new increased capacity and what it's having for the marketplace, because you just can't build a new plant overnight. You can't just put in the new equipment overnight. But pre-COVID, around March of 2020, we had around 18 US plants that were USDA inspected that offered custom meat processing services for farmers. It's hard to get an exact number because sometimes USDA lists that they no longer have USDA inspection, but the USDA website shows that they do. But it was around 18. As of the end of last summer, we had 20 that had USDA inspection with custom services, and had 8 that were under the process. I've not gone back to survey some of these plants to see exactly where they stand. But we've also got 4 that are plants that are being built or finished production. So in reality, we feel like by mid 2023 or end of 23, we'll have gone from around 18 to 20 plants that have USDA inspection services for beef to over between 30 and 32 plants in Kentucky that offer custom processing services under USDA inspection. And they're spread out across the state. Probably not as many in Appalachia as we'd like to see, but some of these plants are in Appalachia. The funding and new plants have gone from all the way from the purchase area in the state near Paducah to just outside Ashland, Kentucky. So it's a wide berth of areas. Some of the challenges that we're still dealing with labor supply and having that experienced labor pool for the meat processing is a challenge that the meat processors are still facing, and so all industries are facing that. But there is a bigger pool is needed for these labor pools. Now, one of the things also is labor costs. It's great that employees are demanding higher wages, but that does require processors to charge higher fees, which forces farmers to charge higher price for their local food products, which does create demand issues down the road, and that's something you've got to worry about. And then also food safety and having plants that have the necessary food safety certification to be able there's various elements of local food systems. Though we've got the USDA allows us to sell to some restaurants, to do some more direct marketing conversations, But lots of the large wholesale markets, such as the Kroger or Whole Foods, requires a greater level of food safety certification called GFSI. And currently, we just have one plant in the state that offers the GFSI certification. We are hopeful that we have 3 plants that are in process of getting that certification done. So hopefully by the end of 23, we'll have 4 plants that can offer that GFSI certification that will allow producers access to markets, to those wholesale outlets that require that greater level of food safety. You know, I think we're starting to see, you know, the wait times that I think are still pretty long in some places, but I'm getting anecdotal evidence where it was 12 to 18 months is now more like 6 months. And I know some of the processors I've talked to that feel like there's been a lot of animals that were double booked because farmers were just trying to find places when they could get them. Also, I'm talking to processors. I'm hearing that a couple have recently finished their expansions, and now they were able to go from one number to the next. And when they announced those bookings, they're not, these new openings are not filling up as quickly as they wanted to. So I think we're probably reaching a point where that maybe, I think we'll be interesting to see in a year or two of where our supply and demand mix is for the demand for processing versus what the services that were out there. I mean, I know that was a concern of KCAR and the concern of our Ag Development Board, that we didn't want to fund people and put them out of business or somebody else out of business by putting somebody new in the marketplace, but trying to make sure that you were putting these strategically across the state and the people that could manage them right and have success, but you didn't want to flood the marketplace. So I think that is, you know, a legitimate concern going forward. So I've rambled on with probably no point for a little making sense for the last few minutes. And so I'll open up the questions for everybody. So.
Well, you know, Brent, you did a great job, and we are getting a little tight on time. So if people do have questions, maybe they can hold them and put them in the chat. We're getting close to our final hour here for the summit. I do want to toss the baton to Jennifer at CFA. She's our active break moderator. People might need to step away. But we'll come back at noon after Jennifer moderates this active break process. So take it away, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Leslie. I am dropping a link in the chat, and then if all goes, I should be sharing my screen. In thinking about all of the amazing work that has been going on in the region around aggregation and distribution, and thinking about the challenges and the opportunities that you've heard about this morning, what we'd like you to do is take a little bit of time and think about what your community most needs in order to build and strengthen the pad infrastructure in your region. So you can click on the link in the chat. Go to menti.com and use this code that's at the top of the screen. And you have an opportunity to put in as many thoughts as you have, and we'll see what happens when we build this word cloud. So I'm going to put on a little bit of music, and folks, you can take your bio break and come back and let us know what you need.
And we'll come back hopefully promptly at noon.
Yes,
so we
see
can
you at noon.
From Liberty, Danny, and Jason. So thanks.
We have about 2 minutes if you want to make certain that you've grabbed that extra cup of coffee or added your ideas to the word cloud. We are at noon, so I'm going to hand it back to Leslie, but the link is going to stay live. So you can continue to add your thoughts to the word cloud, and then after this, we'll get it posted to the CAN website. So thank you all very much.
Having this information is really helpful for us. We'll share a lot of the input that we've gotten through these 5 summits also, and we'll share that in our summary sort of capstone summit at the end of February. So I'm going to just share my screen for one teeny tiny little minute to introduce our next panel. This is all about investment. We have 3 presenters here with us this morning. Liberty Newberry from the Value Chain Cluster Initiative, commonly known as VC2, also a program of PCAP, or Partners Community Capital. And then we have the amazing collaborative work of our friends at Grow Ohio Valley. I know Vincent has, it looks like, set everybody up, but Danny and Jason will be also sharing some of their amazing solutions in terms of funding their food hub as they get started. So, Liberty, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Leslie. Can you hear me all right?
We can, or I can.
Okay, great. Awesome. We've had a little snow on and off this morning. I thought I was going to have to pull a Kathleen and go hop in the car and get on the phone, but so far so good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today to speak on this topic of investing in infrastructure in Central Appalachia. Like Leslie said, my name is Liberty Newberry. I am the program manager for the Value Chain Cluster Initiative, or VC2 as we're commonly called. We are a special initiative of our parent organization, Partner Community Capital. And Partner Community Capital is a CDFI, so that's a community development finance institution, which is a nonprofit lender based in Charlestown, West Virginia. I do have some slides, so let me grab those. And if someone could just give me a thumbs up if you can see those on, well, actually I need to share it, don't I? Let me share screen first. Oh, technology. Okay, is that coming through on your end?
We got them,
Leslie?
Thanks,
Okay,
Liberty.
great. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. So that was just a quick brief introduction on our relationship to Partner Community Capital. And again, we are based in West Virginia. We are, I don't know if I can advance these, that will be good. Okay. So before I get too far into what we do, I just want to give a special thanks to our funders over the years. We have been lucky enough to be funded for going on a decade now. I think actually we are at our decade mark. And some of our biggest supporters have been various USDA programs, the Benedum Foundation, and all the others that are listed here on our slide. Just thank you if anyone is here from any of these organizations. We really appreciate you supporting our work over the years. And I'll get into some examples of how we have made use in just a little. We are a slightly smaller program, I think, compared to some of the ones we've heard from already today. So our scope is a little bit narrower and our offerings as well. But just a little bit about us to kind of kick this off before I get into some examples, which I think is the more exciting part. We are a special initiative of Partner Community Capital. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we serve all of West Virginia. And I think our probably sort of keystone activity or our biggest strength so far that we're finding is that we have a flexible and responsive technical assistance program. Basically what that means is that we don't really have a prescribed list of services. We have examples of what we've done. I'll share more about that in a bit, but primarily our program is responsive. So that means that businesses all along the value chain can come to us with a business related need in the life of their business, and we will do our best to either serve that need in-house with our staff who has a variety of skills and experience in the food space, or we will hire out to a third-party consultant to service that need. And so those consultants are sometimes local, sometimes they're regional. We've worked with a lot of you on this call in that regard. Sometimes they're national. So it just depends on the need and the request from the client that comes to us. And so for the various kind of businesses along the value chain, whether that is an individual producer or an intermediary, so someone working in the pad space, or even another nonprofit or you know, kind of community group, the needs vary between, I would say, and I'll talk about that in just a second, I think on the next slide. We've also dabbled in network support over the years. We have a couple of really strong, robust networks in West Virginia that are growing, and we have also done some capacity building work as well. So here's some examples of some of the technical assistance we have done over the years. These are just a few of the examples. It really runs a gamut. And we've also set up training as well, either for individual businesses or groups of farmers or nonprofits, other folks working in the food space like pad businesses. But and again, the way that we sort of approach training and technical assistance is either to service that in-house with our current staff or hire it out to a third-party consultant. And I don't know how many other organizations are doing that around the state or the region, but for us in West Virginia, it seems to work pretty well to sort of have that flexible TA model and respond to needs as they emerge. In 2021, we serviced over 100 clients with technical assistance and training and over 2,200 hours of TA. I mentioned that we also are working in the network support space. So this sort of ties into that human infrastructure piece we were talking about earlier. We have a couple of really great networks in West Virginia. I saw some of our representatives on the call earlier. If you're here, please say hello in the chat box. So we have the West Virginia Processing, Aggregation, and Distribution Network, or West Virginia PAD, which has been running for well over a decade now, with a couple of different names over the years and different orientations. But we've been providing coordination, facilitation, and backbone support to the PAD network since 2017. It's now really well connected to national networks as well as the CAN network. And we are, continuing to work on connecting the dots in between the different networks and finding the best way to sort of share information and create those feedback loops as they grow. We also support the Ag Action Network, or have supported with some little bit of funding along the way and technical assistance. And we hope to continue to do that with the networks and help them continue to grow and mature and reach sustainability. Quickly, we have also worked in capacity building, which I think we sort of define as either partnering on grants or events, trainings, collaborating with other peer nonprofit organizations throughout the state, a little bit of mentoring of certain groups and organizations along the way, and some fiscal sponsorship of several projects along the way in organizations. And the most recent example of that is that we were fiscal sponsors for the West Virginia Forest Farming Coalition, which was established in 2019 and has just recently received their second Benham grant for 2023. So they're growing, which is really exciting. We have recently partnered on a grant application to the USDA, sorry, I can't see my own screen here, USDA Increasing Capital, Land Access and Markets grant with partners down in the New River Gorge region. New Roots Community Farm, who we heard from a little earlier, is the lead on that application. And so that's exciting because that's going to give us a chance to work in some new spaces in terms of technical assistance delivery and trying to figure out how to serve new and beginning farmers, BIPOC farmers and organizations, as well as folks getting into the land access space. And then again, we've also, we're working to coordinate across the state and region with other food and farm organizations, specifically this year, hoping to work closely with Refresh Appalachia on some training. That's just a really quick overview of what we're working on in terms of just our sort of arms of what we do. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the projects that we have supported. So the first one, I'm sure a lot of you know Tootie Jones and have worked with her over the years. Tootie is the owner of Swift Level Fine Meats in Lewisburg, West Virginia. She works in retail and wholesale meat sector. And the TA project that we worked with Tootie on involved workforce development training for her staff and a business assessment of her operation. We hired Range Meats Academy, Carrie to work on this with Tootie in 2022, and they have plans to work together again in 2023 on additional training for her staff. So there's some highlights there for Tootie. I wish I had more time to tell you all of the amazing things about these businesses that I'm going to just quickly mention. So I encourage you to please go and find them and support them if you can. But a couple of highlights: she has been voted the best butcher shop in West Virginia for the last 3 years. And she, as far as we know, is the only butcher shop in West Virginia doing in-house cured meats, bacons, and charcuterie. She's doing a lot of value-added products as well. The next farm that we have worked with recently that I wanted to feature, I believe I saw Scott on the call as well, Scott Wrightsell. This is Dean's Gap Farm in Fort Siebert, West Virginia. Scott and his wife, Becky, are working on a number of exciting things at their farm, including smoking meats and antibiotic-free poultry. They do high tunnel produce and a lot of catering as well. And so the project that we were able to support with Dean's Gap Farm, it was a logo development and website project with Ajuga Inc. And Ajuga also trained Scott and Becky on how to manage the website on the back end and do some social media tie-ins with that as well. This was a joint project with Woodlands Development Group's Mon Forest Initiative. So there are other initiatives at PCAP that I will talk about in a little bit, and others that we partner with. So when we can, we try to collaborate in that way. You can find Dean's Gap Farm at deansgapfarm.com, as well as on Facebook, Dean's Gap Farm High Tunnel. Another project, and these sort of run a gamut across the value chain, you might notice. Another one we worked on recently was with the Billy Motel and Ish Restaurant and Bar in Davis, West Virginia. This is the restaurant sector lodging. The project we worked on was architectural design services for a dining room expansion project with To Be Done Studio. This was also a joint project with the Mon Forest Initiative. And the thing that I found interesting about this is that it was a dining room expansion post-COVID. So interestingly, we have had a lot of requests to support architectural design for things like kitchen expansion, kitchen redesign, community kitchen projects post-COVID. So that's kind of an interesting trend. And if you want to learn more about the Billy, you can check them out at their website or on Facebook, or they were also featured in West Virginia Living's Winter 2022 issue, and that's a really good article. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Getting to the realm of aggregation and distribution and pad space and other nonprofit organizations. The New Roots Community Farm based in Fayetteville, West Virginia is another organization that we've worked with recently. We supported accounting support, legal review services, and are currently working on a feasibility study with Kitchen Table Consultants with New Roots Community Farm. Also supported concept planning and some market research with Rooted Community Consulting and Lost Creek Farm as well. And so New Roots Community Farm, Gabe, you heard from him earlier. They're doing amazing things in the Fayetteville area. They are a community-owned farm. They have so much going on, so many exciting things. They're really a kind of cornerstone community space down there. And we're able to leverage some of our TA dollars and resources with an Opportunity Appalachia grant that they received to help for architectural and engineering design services on their New River Gorge Ag and Culinary Center, which is forthcoming. So if you'd like to learn more about New Roots, you can check them out at their website and on the web. I'm sorry, on Facebook. I think this is the last one I want to feature here quick, and that is Mountain Harvest Farm in Morgantown, West Virginia. They are a family farm with a bustling CSA program serving into the retail, wholesale, and farmers markets spaces. I know a lot of folks on here who have worked on the corridor project will also recognize Mountain Harvest, and Mary and Chico have been, I believe, part of that as well over the years. Recently, they were the NRCS recipient of the 2022 National Hispanic Farmer of the Year Award, which is very exciting. And yeah, they're just one of our, I think, longer established and exciting farm operations up north. You can find out more about them on Facebook and also Mountain Harvest Farm LLC.com. So those are just a few examples kind of across the value chain I wanted to feature. I wish I could tell you so much more about all of them and the other projects that we've worked on. Since post-COVID, I think I mentioned a little bit about what some of the things we've been asked to work on, like the kitchen design and expansion projects. We've also been approached a lot for supporting website development, a lot of e-commerce requests, and more folks looking to sort of enhance their marketing and online visibility. So this, I'm going to just be honest with you, this is a weak spot. I do not know a lot about the lending side of the house at PCAP. So I'm just going to share this overview of the sort of basic terms and interest rates at PCAP. If anyone has a question about anything related to PCAP, I will do my best to answer it, or I can forward you to the right person who actually works on the lending side. But I can share that PCAP, Partner Community Capital, is a CDFI lender, a nonprofit lender, sometimes referred to as an alternative lender. And they are, we aim to have more flexible terms than a traditional lender. We offer wraparound TA support along with the lending. So that might look like consulting, or it might look like just working one-on-one with business advisors and coaches through the application process. It can be good for first-time borrowers and entrepreneurs and folks in these sort of emerging spaces like agriculture. And yeah, it was started in West Virginia in 2000. And again, their mission is to serve businesses that traditional lenders are typically unable or unwilling to service. And so PCAP has sort of a two-pronged approach to investing in the local food sector or just in small business in general. Flexible loan capital is one piece of the approach. The other piece is setting up these various targeted technical assistance initiatives. And so here's a list of the current initiatives in West Virginia that are managed by PCAP. And really what they are is they're just small teams that are focused in these different, various areas that are emerging or need additional support in order to grow those sectors. And so PCAP does that by supporting small teams of folks to coach and advise and sort of manage these technical assistance projects and other things, and to help add capacity to these different areas to help them grow. This slide I debated on showing because I created this really simple chart to just show how from the time that we began collecting data for the CAN network back in 2009, which was just PCAP collecting that data, through about 2013 or so when VC2 initiative was launched, the average amount of investment that PCAP was making per year into the food and ag space was about $54,000 in ag loans primarily, and probably a little bit of technical assistance at that time as well. And when I was pulling some data for Leslie recently, I noticed that when the VC2 initiative was launched, so a special targeted initiative in 2013, and as it began to grow over the years, the amount of investment going into this sector on both the loans and the technical assistance front really shot up quite a bit. And so by 2014, the amount of investment was over $760,000 combined TA and loans. And then by 2019, that number shot up to 2.5 million. So there's a little bit of fluctuation here year to year, and some of that is due to the kinds of loans that were made and how many and the amount of technical assistance, and also programmatic fluctuations. So there is some volatility there that you can see, and I think that's kind of expected. But overall, the trend has been upward in terms of the impact that I think PCAP has been able to make by having these special initiatives in place and sort of working through those as a strategy to help grow the economy. So that is it for me. I think I'm coming in on time here. You can reach me at libertynewberry@vc2.com. I'm the program manager of VC2 again. And then here are some here's some contact information for our lenders as well, if you would like to reach out to either of our West Virginia-based lenders to learn more about the lending side of Partner Community Capital.
Wow, thanks so much, Liberty. I know you're on a really tight schedule. Thanks for fitting this in. I'm wondering if you would just have a few minutes for any questions folks might have.
Yeah, absolutely. I have probably 5 minutes, and then I have to unfortunately jump into another meeting. I'm sad to miss the next panelists, who I'm sure are going to have some wonderful things to share with you. Yeah, if anyone has a question.
So any questions for VC2? Congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you so much.
And I love that graph.
Okay. I know. I was like, should I share this? There's a little bit, but no, I think overall it hopefully shows that there's been some good things coming out of it.
For sure. So any questions for Liberty before she departs and goes to her next meeting? The Zoom room is quiet.
Zoom room is quiet.
You answered everyone's questions.
I hope so. I hope we cleared up the how are PCAP and VC2 related to each other question. We get that one sometimes.
I know. I still struggle. I still want to call you NCIF, which was the previous name.
As do I.
Yes.
Well, thank you all so much. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you, and I see so many familiar faces that we've worked with in a variety of ways over the years. Annie Stroud, fun fact, actually trained me at VC2 in 2014 when she was working there, and so it's just exciting to still be working with you all, and lots of new faces too. So please reach out if I can help you. If you need technical assistance or business advisory services, we're here for you, and we just look forward to continuing to work with you all.
Again, thanks for your time, and
thanks.
Happy meetings.
Okay, thanks. You as well. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Okay. Well, I'm going to welcome Jason, and it looks like we've got Vincent. Sorry, Vincent, I didn't give you the proper acknowledgement as a team presenter, but we know many of us know you from previous presentations here on the summit. So now we really want to look at, some of the ways that Grow Ohio Valley has really harnessed, and I would say innovated different funding streams to grow their infrastructure for many of their projects. So I will let you guys take it away. Vincent, I've made you the co-host, so if you guys do have slides, you should be able to share your screen.
Hello, everyone. I'll look for some thumbs up. Can people see that presentation? Leslie, I'll look to you for a thumbs up. All right. Very good. Well, thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Liberty. The Value Chain Cluster Initiative is really something. They do great work. So great following up, Liberty. And thanks for everyone at CAN for helping put on this summit and for asking us to speak. I'm here with Jason Kegler. Jason, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Sounds like Liberty's been in her role for 10 years. This is my 14th day as executive director of Grow Ohio Valley. Don't worry, although Danny is in the air now, he had a delay on his way to Columbia. He's not leaving the organization, just going to be assuming more of a different kind of role. And so I've assumed this role. I'm a native of Wheeling. I grew up in Ogilvy Park. I, like a lot of my peers who graduated high school in the 90s, at probably the bottoming out of the depression of Wheeling, left the area and lived in the Bay Area for almost a decade and came back 15 years ago, and ever since, up until January 1st, I worked at West Liberty University here in the Northern Panhandle of West Virginia, which is a regional West Virginia public institution. And a lot of what I did there will translate here at Grow Ohio Valley in terms of public relations, government relations, fundraising, marketing, and all those kind of things. But I am like thrilled to be here. I wouldn't call myself a farmer. But I'm all in on learning, and I just took about 20 ties to the Salvation Army, and I love being able to wear jeans.
Welcome to Grow Ohio Valley. And yeah, I'll give a little bit of background about both Danny and Grow Ohio Valley. We should probably acknowledge that, yeah, Leslie asked us to speak a little bit about one of our newer funding streams that we tried just last year or so, what colloquially called earmarks or congressionally directed funding. And again, Jason noted Danny's experience. Danny's been the co-founder of Grow Ohio Valley since our creation in 2014. Has been the executive director for the past 5 years, and we're really happy that he got us to where we are and has passed off the reins here to Jason. And we note in this bio here that of all of Danny's gifts, of which farming is one, Danny is a farmer, fundraising and development has been one of them. And Danny, in addition to his charm, is a great grant writer. And that's how Grow Ohio Valley raised, got us going. We're through a series of very generous gifts and awards and well-written grants. And this congressionally directed funding was something new for us, so we're happy to talk about it. But we think it's fair to give some people on the call a little overview of Grow Ohio Valley. I like framing Grow Ohio Valley in terms of this report that the Appalachian Regional Commission, along with a bunch of partners, put out last year. Agriculture and local food economies in the Appalachian region sounds relevant to this summit. And if you haven't read it already, I imagine most people on this call already have, it's terrific. Just chock full of what we're going for here in terms of developing the food economy as an economic driver. And there's great infographics, essentially a vertically integrated food system, a value chain, as a nod to Liberty over there. And they note that each one of these links in that food chain is either an opportunity for money to leave our economy and go to, into the global food system, but it's also an opportunity to retain money circulating in our economy. And it so happens that Grow Ohio Valley, as a vertically integrated food organization, has tie-ins to each one of those. So I like framing it this way. We farm. On the bottom right there is our farm incubator. We have a bunch of urban farm sites as well, including a 300 plus tree apple orchard. We have a grocery store, the Public Market, there on the right, opened in 2018, thanks to a ARC Power Award. Eliminated 3 USDA classified food deserts. Huge, opening up food access to downtown Wheeling, Ohio Valley. And then I put on here that on the consumer end, we consume food. I like nodding to our education programs there. We do a lot of food literacy programming. And that is trying to inform the consumer there. And then those middle rungs of this vertically integrated food system, the processing and distribution that the ARC report talks about, those are the aims of Food Hub in general and what we're calling the Wheeling Food Hub in Ohio Valley. So there's a little overview of what we do. And yeah, we're right here in Wheeling, West Virginia, the upper Ohio River Valley, 30 minutes downriver from Pittsburgh. Our vision is to achieve regional food sovereignty. We're building a food system where farmers flourish and local healthy food is a way of life. We were asked to talk about earmarks today, so go ahead, take it away, Jason.
So I'd say, some of you are familiar with this, some of you have probably been successful in this, but decades ago, earmarks existed, and they were called, like the fun term would be like pork spending. So you would have a bill totally unrelated to and like a bridge in West Virginia, but you're able to like add on senators and congressmen would be able to add on specific programs to a bill in order to enhance the state, like the infrastructure or planning like seed programs that help communities grow and be healthier and have better equality in education for example. And so in West Virginia, we're lucky, we're very fortunate to have the most famous and successful pork barrel earmark acquirer because he was on the committee that got to determine this, and that was Senator Robert Byrd, who was one of the longest serving senators in terms of his tenure in the history of this country, and just all in West Virginia. People joke that there are more things named in honor of Senator Byrd than there are people with the last name Smith, maybe in West Virginia, and including in this area. And so earmarks went away for a number of years, and they recently returned in the past few years. And we're fortunate again in West Virginia that Senator Manchin and Senator Caputo are highly involved on the committee that determines those as well. And then we're also, I think a lot of us are from smaller states. In the Senate, you have 2 senators representing each state. And so the smaller states have better opportunities to gain earmarks because there are less people and smaller areas. Yeah.
And the same amount of senators.
Right, exactly. So if in California, I'm sure it's a much more challenging situation. And so I'm just start with like a little bit of a history and the impact that these type of things have had in the past in our region. Congressman Mollahan and Senator Byrd's help helped create a relationship through an earmark funding program that tied NASA to Wheeling Jesuit University here at Wheeling, and the Challenger, which was like a phenomenal collaboration between NASA, Wheeling Jesuit University, and the K-12 community here in like just an unbelievable way to connect students and our youth to help them like learn and dream of bigger and better things outside of their community, which they would not have this opportunity otherwise. It still exists in a more limited, structure, but it really served this community for a number of decades, and one of those points of pride here in our community. Ogilvy Park, which I'm like really familiar with. This example is one of those that if you can stretch the mission of a proposal and really like talk about like the impact of something, you can be creative and really get things done. So if you've ever been to Ogilvy Park, they actually doubled the size of their hotel called Wilson Oak Lodge through an earmark through Senator Byrd. It's called the Byrd Wing, of course. And how they were able to obtain that is that they are a very unique model. They're a self-sustaining municipal park. And so what Ogilvy meets is mission-based. It's not a revenue generator. So expanding the capacity of people being able to visit Ogilvy only enhances the local economy of our area. The example that that is like relevant to where we are sitting right now is Heritage Port. So Wheeling at one time was the gateway to the West. Believe it or not, there were like just as many people living in Wheeling at one time in the 19th century. And then Atlanta is a center for industry. The national road ran through Wheeling to the west. So people would come here, and it was a river port and a gateway to the expansion, America's expansion. And so this port here that you see where this parking garage is was like a center point and focal of the downtown area. And so they built a convention center eventually about 50 years ago. And you know, like when I was like 12 years old, I went to a Guns N' Roses concert there. But there was this parking garage that kind of served that purpose of bringing people to this civic center. The issue here is that we have one of the most historic bridges still in existence here called the Wheeling Suspension Bridge. It is a beautiful, basically like the trademark of our brand of Wheeling, and you couldn't see it. You couldn't see the river. And then it was such a gigantic thing that it took up this space of like river development, which was, you know, occurring in the 80s and 90s in bigger cities like the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, for example, like a centerpiece for revitalization. And so there was great resistance of people who said, we need to tear that thing down. And what happened was people in the community worked with Senator Byrd's office, gained $4 million in earmark in the late 1990s, and not only the funding, but the power of this coming from the federal government through Senator Byrd, basically like the resistors had to throw their hands up. So it's like earmarks actually serve like a dual purpose in terms of like moving something forward. And as we all know, especially in small towns, these things are very challenging. So what is it like now? Well, we have a beautiful amphitheater on the river. We have a festival like every weekend in the summer. Tons of people are learning about Wheeling coming from all over the country. They did build a parking garage, and it's a beautiful architecture, if one can be one. And guess what? Our public market is on the first floor of the Robert C. Byrd Intermodal. And so, like, again, another example of something like this having like a powerful return on investment. So where are we now? As long as the Congress is situated in this way, earmarks will continue. They're going to be available this year. We're gonna go for what we got an earmark funded at Grow High Valley last year or to spend this year. We'll apply for another one. Just advice, if you're not familiar, treat it as a individual donor. Work that relationship. Check in with the offices and staffs of each of your senators. Figure out which senator might have more pull or is more invested in your mission. And when you apply, you can learn about everything about like the different categories that you can apply for, but like really focus on, they basically lay out what they will fund. I can give you an example. At West Liberty last year, we were late in the game. Senator Manchin's office contacted us and say, hey, aren't you going to apply for anything, West Liberty? And we had 10 days notice. So we had two proposals. One that was funded was for a direct health sciences related and increase the capacity of a capital project to bring in a master's program in clinical psych and actual lab space, funded at $1 million. The other one we tried to stretch. We weren't really listening to the actual case for support that they were asking us to, because we didn't have money for signage and a website. And so we asked for all these things and we tried to make it relate, and it wasn't funded. So it took a lot of our time. It wasn't really a waste of time. It helped us to develop our own project. But at the same time, those are like, I think, two good examples of like, how things are funded and how they.
That's great background, Jason. Thanks. And you're even giving out your playbook.
I know. What was I doing?
But yeah, that's great. So just to revisit some of that, I didn't even realize how early on earmarks had been banned, or at least kind of quelled a bit. But they brought them back in 2021, and the stated reason, in addition to funding all those community projects, is to help foster bipartisanship, which is an admirable goal. And you can make whatever political statements you want about that. That's the state of the system, but bipartisanship is great. So they brought it back in 2021, and we applied. Grow Valley did. We looked at our programs, and we wanted to reach for one of our biggest economic development programs. That being kind of what Grow Valley already does as a food hub, but really expanding that out in terms of business acceleration and incubation, supporting local farmers, creating jobs with the grocery store. So we wrote for the Wheeling Food Hub program. Another nice aspect of that ask is that the building that we are developing for that project is an abandoned, dilapidated warehouse building in downtown. Jason mentioned the economic transition, this Rust Belt narrative, economic downturn, and that need is real, and it also is what our senators are tasked, our public servants are tasked with addressing, and these funding opportunities are opportunities to help address that need. So we applied for the Wheeling Food Hub. It was the first time we had written an earmark because our organization is 8 years old, and apparently earmarks hadn't been around since 2011. We did work with through the city, and most of your municipalities probably have someone like this in Washington who advocates on the city's behalf and kind of knows the rules of the road here, or just knowing development people like Jason. We didn't know Jason at the time. Yeah, we put together our ask, and Danny was really lead on this, but I think to Jason's point there, treating that process like individual donors, it's a combination of that and a grant, because there is a grant application that you need to make sure is, is right on. It's not a grant to cut corners on. But then, the unique aspect to it is the cultivating the personal relationships, navigating the political world, especially as a nonprofit, but again, staying true to your mission, and then, seeing which of your representatives resonate with that.
I think that the round of earmarks, the deadline is going to be sometime in April or May. I don't think we have a date on that yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's worth noting, again, in 2021, they were new. And so there were a lot of people who were almost caught unaware. And they've gotten a lot more competitive, at least in West Virginia. Yeah. Again, given kind of the national profile of our senators in a split Congress. That is, those are realities to consider there. But certainly, it doesn't hurt to try. It's the same with the grant. put in all that effort writing a grant. Maybe you get it, maybe you don't. Either way, don't throw that grant away. You know, you can recycle that and keep trying. And getting no's is part of the fundraising process. And every once in a while, hopefully a yes comes along. Leslie, I don't know where we are on time, but you know, we certainly want to acknowledge our funders, including on this presentation, Senators Capito and Manchin, and our terrific partners. And this is by no means an extensive list, but thanks to the Central Appalachian Network. And yeah, we're happy to field comments or questions or discussion.
Yeah, the one thing I would point out in terms of this remarkable journey for Grow Ohio Valley is that all these years that you've been building your programs, building awareness at a very grassroots level within the Ohio Valley and certainly the city of Wheeling, is that you've gotten a lot of advocates along the way. So the multiple types of stakeholders, definitely appreciate that slide acknowledging all your funders who definitely create a validation in terms of, I think, you guys being sort of earmark worthy. So that's a piece of it. But I think the other piece of it is just the way that your programs have been embraced by your community. And that, yes, you may be still, you know, in the early stages of your development. 10 years is, you know, a pretty good run at this stage. But now I think you're getting much more recognition at the regional level. I think sharing this earmark experience as you've used it as a sort of keystone to further the fundraising you need for the food hub is going to be a best practice that you guys can share with other organizations throughout Central Appalachia. So I'm wondering, we'll pause for a minute before I do one last wrap-up slide for investment in infrastructure. Are there any questions for Vincent and Jason at this point? I've been kind of watching the chat. I haven't really seen anything, but now is the time to unmute and ask a question if you have one.
Or drop it in the chat. Happy to respond there too.
We're at that time of the day.
But while people are thinking, Leslie, to your comment there, absolutely. This group, the CAN network, whether it's AceNet, I think I saw ASD on here, K-Card, the Value Chain Cluster Initiative, you all have raised the bar. You know, being able to look up to your organizations and learn from that, thank you. We wouldn't be here without that. So yeah, we are happy to have your example and are happy to contribute back whatever we can to keep building this food system together, because that's how we're going to do it.
Well, thanks, Vincent, for those kind words. I think all of us who have been partners within the Central Appalachian Network not only appreciate one another, but we're always extremely appreciative of folks who are sort of, as I would refer to it, joining this movement, so that we're, you know, we're all peers walking together as we build this road. One of the things that I just wanted to share here, you know, we've talked about, I would say, some of the bigger ways that we as practitioners or even for-profit businesses are raising capital. That said, there's folks working in local food systems all across the region at very different scales and at very different sort of points of entry. So I really just want to underline that there's a lot of opportunity around community capital solutions, aside from our great CDFIs who invest in regional food systems, the new group that we're going to have as one of our presenters in Summit 6, Invest Appalachia. You know, there's a lot of things that are helping us go to scale especially in terms of investing in infrastructure. But there's also a lot of programs out there that food and farm enterprises can harness, even in the startup phase. In Ohio, Rural Action runs a great Kiva program. Many of our farm businesses have been able to access Kiva loans to be able to maybe put in an irrigation system or purchase some processing equipment or upgrade their pack house. I think Martin mentioned it in our opener at a little after 9 this morning. The Central Appalachian Family Fund has also been another sort of revenue stream for operators at many stages of their development. I think a lot of folks have been using it for equipment and infrastructure upgrades. During COVID, partners in Ohio and West Virginia released resilience grants. Also in Ohio, we have a brand program called Ohio's Winding Road, which has provided seed grants. And again, very tiny grants, sometimes for equipment or even for brand materials, marketing, working capital. And then the CAN mini grants will probably be making a return here at some point in the near future. You know, I think of some of the programs that have been able to access a CAN mini grant to ignite maybe additional funding, get them to the next level. So Shagbark Seed and Mill, community food initiatives. There's a gazillion examples. Well, maybe not a gazillion. There's a few examples of how CAN has invested in projects across the region. And then just the opportunity for our farmers and our food operators to look at some of the other programs, the EQUIP funding, SARE, the value-added producer grant programs. You know, these are other community capital solutions beyond some of the larger loan products from our local banks, our CDFIs, or even some of the new venture money that's coming into the region. And then since this is a joint project with the USDA, I think many of us are really excited and anticipating the game-changing investment that the new USDA Regional Food Business Center awards will help with many of our food and farm businesses, as well as some of the regional projects. So those business builder grants that can go directly to for-profit operators, I think, are going to make a huge difference throughout the subregions of Central Ohio. So stay tuned. This is going to immediately segue into our wrap up today. I'm checking out the chat again. It looks like from Martin, maybe you want to chime in a little bit on the Farm Bill. You know, this is also shared work that I think we'll be able to touch on Summit 6. So Martin, did you want to say anything more about that?
Well, it's Farm Bill season, right? Yeah, it's a big thing. And I'm sure a lot of us are working on that. And CAN, as well as a number of CAN organizations, including CFA, are members of the National Sustainable Ag Coalition. So, you know, we depend on them to, you know, be our eyes and ears in DC. And I know for us is that we are sending farmers to the March 6th, I think it's 6th, fly-in and advocacy in DC. But we also have, I think we've got CFA staff, including myself, in DC every month, and we'll continue to do so. Just keep monitoring it.
Yeah, and stay tuned. I'm not sure. I think at some point, and maybe some of us will want to push this a little bit more than others, I'll raise my hand, is that I think out of the food and ag system working groups, we'll probably be weighing in on some of the platform endorsements that we want to see in the Farm Bill. You know, the Farm Bill really needs to touch Central Appalachia in ways that it hasn't touched us in the past. So we all need to advocate for this work for our food and farm entrepreneurs as we build a fair food system that really supports food and farm products and produce and meat and dairy and you name it as an economic driver as we sort of reanimate and oftentimes repopulate our rural areas and smaller cities throughout Central Appalachia. So I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you for hanging with us. Martin, did you have something else?
Yeah, I think we're all, or a lot of us are anxious to see when they finally release the awards for the regional food business centers. And Appalachia was a designated region. And so that potentially is a nice chunk of change that will come into the region.
Yeah, we know someone in Appalachia will be chosen.
We know someone.
And we know that whoever is probably chosen, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to direct our food and farm businesses to that new level of investment. So that is a great way to set up Summit 6. USDA partners will probably have a much larger part of Summit 6's agenda to really talk about some of their existing programs, some of the new cooperative agreements, some of the initiatives that are being in many ways funded in unprecedented ways. And we need to stay close to our friends at USDA. We'll be making some recommendations here with regards to policy, certainly weighing in on the Farm Bill. So if you have information you want to share with us between now and February 6th, please do, or February, I forget what the date is, maybe Megan or Kayla can put it in the chat, but it's that last Thursday, 9 to 1 at the end of February. And that will be our 6th and final capstone summit. So this has been quite a journey. Happy New Year to you all. Please spread the word. All of this information is resourced on the CAN website, cannetwork.org. Please pass on information to your network so that we can get more people to find this information and hopefully activate more of this work in partnership throughout Central Appalachia. So we're going to end a little bit early. Maybe it's 12:56. You guys get another 4 minutes of time. So any other final words from our organizers? Martin, I still see you unmuted.
Yeah, I think we got to make sure and acknowledge Megan and Kayla, who have been working so much behind the scenes, make things, wrangle folks and make things work, and very appreciative of that.
Yep, awesome communication team. So thanks for reminding us, Martin. Okay, see you February 23rd. Get your friends and colleagues to register for Summit 6.